Hey, Susan, you're on mute.
Yes.
A question for Boyd. He's on his cell phone. How does he unmute from a cell phone?
If he's on a iPad.
No, he's on
Yeah,
he's on his Samsung cell phone.
Oh, you know what? That's a Pam. Pam, are you on? Because I don't have a Samsung. Pam? Someone that has a Samsung has to tell him. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know I always do it from my iPad.
Evening, everyone. Pam, can you hear me okay? I want to do it. Okay.
Hold on 1 second, I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. We are commencing a work session with the Basalt Town Council and Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Our first order of business is to call the roll for our council, and then we will get underway with Matt Yamashita from CPW.
Okay, let's try that again. Gary Tenenbaum.
Here.
Thank you, Gary. Bill Infante.
Still here.
Thank you, Bill. Glenn Drummond.
Here.
There he is. Thank you. David Knight.
Here.
Thank you, David. Elise Hoddle.
Present.
Thank you, Elise. Ryan Slack.
Here.
Thank you, Ryan. And Bill Kane.
Here. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Okay. The A-team is present. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I would like to kick this off with a welcome and a thank you to Matt Yamashita. I know how busy these guys are, and this is way after hours. I know their days start mighty early. So, Matt, we appreciate you sitting in with us and chatting through a kind of a series of topics that are really of interest to this council and the citizens of the town. And, good to see you. And I'll let you and Ryan, I think, have a little agenda to lead us through a discussion of some fun stuff. So again, thanks for being with us tonight. And Ryan, do you want to take it?
Sure. I thought, Matt and I talked, it's been a little while at this point, a week or two. But when we left off, I think doing a general check-in with council, we thought would be a good idea as we're coming into the spring, and thought we would kind of outline status of improvements at the shooting range. Those have been progressing. There's a few more left to do, and I think this summer there could be some additional progress on that front. But then also wanted to talk about Lake Christine itself and some of the progress that could be made there moving into the future. I believe they're doing some more testing on the dam that would lead us to, some kind of conclusion as to whether we should pursue keeping it as a lake, or, perhaps, transitioning that into some other riparian use or something along those lines, but keeping it as an amenity nonetheless. And then just some general updates on perhaps where they are with management of the area, and maybe some future uses out there. Town council has been interested in having a discussion potentially about a trail, which we really haven't had those discussions at length with CPW. They're aware of the interest, but thought we could just start with that, and I think that's quite a bit of information to share. So, Matt, if you wanted to jump in and kind of kick things off, it'd be great. And thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, Ryan. Mayor, Council, I appreciate the opportunity to come and catch up with you and chat about some things. I think I'll second what both Ryan and Mayor Kane said, that it seems like a healthy way to progress as neighbors, and just keeping, on finding a way to keep in touch and provide some occasional updates, just so that we know what's going on the other side of the fence. So with that in, Ryan, is there any specific order you want to go, or any topic that's of more interest?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if we can just move through each of them, and then council may have some follow-up questions. If you want me to throw something out, maybe start with the shooting range and give an update there on the improvements and what you guys are looking at doing this upcoming season, and then we can just progress.
Perfect. So going on with the shooting range, I don't know if you saw or were aware, we had a bunch of heavy equipment being mobilized earlier today, was showing up at Lake Christine. Our heavy equipment operator is coming into town here for this week. He brought with him a bunch of, I think he has, I believe he brought an excavator, a dozer. All this is aimed at doing some improvements up there. One of those is the second phase of what we've been discussing with Chief Thompson, and that's the fire mitigation up on top in the form of the green belt. So that was a concept that CPW had worked with Chief Thompson. He had proposed installing a green belt up above the shooting range, and that's part of it. You know, his whole dream is to find a way to create this green belt that essentially travels along all of, you know, the near outside of the town of Basalt in order to kind of provide a fire break in case of another catastrophic fire event, as we saw back in 2018. This fire break here, this green belt, we began on it last year, and working with permission from Excel, we repurposed an old access road that came across the north side of the shooting range underneath the power lines. It was an area that was already cleared of vegetation, had a historical road built in there, and we repurposed that road, rebuilt it as a matter of fact, and it's now, this past year, he used a bulldozer to make it about 14 foot wide. There's some significant rocks up on that hillside that he's trying to negotiate and maneuver around, but the end goal with the whole thing is to kind of doze this out and create an actual road where we can facilitate the movement of full-size vehicles. And in the case of a fire or another emergency event, where whether it's fire or other first responder personnel can utilize that road to access the upper portion of the shooting range, get up back behind there at a moment's notice, not have to rely on foot to haul hoses or water or anything up above there. We can get vehicles in place in an expedited fashion. The second part of that is we, you know, Chief Thompson had made note during the Lake Christine fire that the areas that were planted with vegetation and kept green through water and irrigation, those served as the best fire break. They were the most resilient. They actually helped stop by catching embers instead of allowing embers to blow through. And he proposed that idea to us. And so we're over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to strategically work with our heavy equipment operator at going through annually and continuing with dozer work on there, trying to pack down, you know, what's settled over the previous year and expand that road so that, you know, it's serviceable and it'll be enough to catch embers as they may blow across if another fire were to ever start there. Obviously, the goal is to not have another fire ever start in the area, but this is kind of a fail-safe mechanism there. In doing that, you know, once we get that road finally settled here in the next couple years, it'll likely be, we've slated it to be a 3-year project, last year being year 1. We're going to see how things settle out, how things have compacted, and then we'll have a better feel for it every year. But on the time frame of 3 years out, we have 2 more years remaining. And at that, you know, in the next year or so here, start engaging with the town and see if there are ways where we can facilitate water up onto the hillside. You know, we may be able to get some sort of a sprinkler or drip line system to grow vegetation in there. I've already had conversations with the State Forest Service and have been provided with a list of fire resistant vegetation. So, you know, we're looking at vegetation that's not going to grow too tall or become, you know, carry a fire on its own, doesn't burn easily. Something that is fairly drought tolerant, drought resistant, that we don't have to use 100 gallons of water every day to keep alive. But I think we've identified some plant species that may fit the bill there. So once we can get some sort of a water system in place, then, you know, put the appropriate plants in there and go from there. So that's the first major concept. I think, you know, before I go on to anything else, that's something that shouldn't be, I don't think it's really new news, but just an update on it. You know, obviously over the course of the next couple of days here, the shooting range is going to be closed as our equipment operator is working up on the north side there to kind of revisit that green belt. But before I move on, does anybody have any questions or anything else to add?
And I will say I did include Boyd this evening, just in case there were questions on the water line that he would be able to answer.
Perfect, thanks. And yes, we we've already started looking into some of that, and our plan is to probably here within this next year start visiting with Boyd and just make sure that by the time we've got everything hardened up there and that whole swath ready to go, that we already have started answering some of the questions on how we facilitate water up on the hillside. So I know the longer and bigger project, Chief Thompson's request is to extend that beyond the scope of the shooting range and carry it, along the remainder of our property and onto town property and even some of the adjacent BLM or Forest Service lands. So we're trying to get the ball rolling and start the process and see what it looks like and how hard or easy it may be. So hopefully this is the first of many progressive actions to come. The next thing we're also looking at doing is this was another thing that was addressed by Chief Thompson was the security fences that are currently sitting on top of the berms that separate the various shooting ranges there. They're wooden security fences. They're meant to, for all intents and purposes, they're the purpose they serve really is just as a visual barrier. They're not really constructed where they would stop, a round from a firearm per se. They may help deafen it or slow the velocity, but they're truly not built out of wood that's going to, stop that round from continuing someplace else. In addition, it's wood. It serves as a potential fire hazard there, located on the shooting range. So our plan was to go through and reevaluate what those berms, how they're constructed. We're looking at options. One of the options is to import additional fill material and try to build those berm heights higher. As you build those higher, then the footprint that those berms lie on also expands, and we start losing a significant portion of the range surface itself. One of the other things we had looked at on some of the other ranges in the area were the use of the concrete jersey barriers. Those are impenetrable by a round from a gun, and looking at trying to repurpose some of those. And recently we've come into an agreement with one of our hatchery units that's looking to get rid of a few of those. So we're trying to find a way to maybe repurpose those and utilize those in order to help increase the berm height between ranges, and keep a safe, add the safety component there, where if a range were to be fired in the wrong direction, that it prevents that round from traveling onto an adjacent range where somebody may not be aware of it. So that's something that we're in flux right now. We're trying to make something happen here while our equipment operators in the area. If not, then we'll be likely moving on that later this summer. I don't know if and when that will actually occur, but it's kind of a two-phase project. We got to get into the site where those jersey barriers are currently stored down in Carbondale, find a way to load them up and transport them, and then get the right equipment in place. And we thought we had some of that equipment lined out with CDOT, and we haven't been able to work out the kinks there. So we're looking for some help with equipment that can move some of that around and can connect to some of the old style jersey barriers and haul those around. So not sure if the town has any of that or would want to participate in it, but if so, then get in touch with me later on, and that would be of assistance, maybe help expedite some of that process. Obviously, we can go up and take a look on site too and see what that would entail, and if it's something that is is a possibility. The last, another thing up on the shooting range is continual improvement of the vegetation in the area. And by improvement, I mean, getting rid of any vegetation that's burnable or that. So we've got that slated here. I believe that's coming up here the first part of May. We're going to be closing the shooting range down for a week and working to remove, continually treat the surface of the range, remove vegetation that is growing on there, that exists on there, prevent anything that may be a fire hazard. In addition to that, repurposing some of the mill that is currently stored down by Lake Christine there, and using that to help harden the surface, prevent additional vegetation from growing in. And the last part of that is our property technicians spent the winter rebuilding a bunch of shooting ranges, the benches for the ranges, and we're going to be installing those on the pistol and rifle ranges. So you'll see some improvements made there. In addition to that, there's going to be some chains placed up in association with that similar to how it's done down in Cameo in order to prevent people from walking forward beyond the line while people are actively shooting, kind of minimize some of those safety concerns. We haven't had an incident that was a result of somebody doing that, but just to have some forethought and foresight, looking to prevent something from occurring in the future. So those are some of the general range maintenance projects that are going to carry us here. Some of that's occurring this week. And like I mentioned, the first week of May, our staff will be on site handling a lot of that. So are there anything else that I was missing on the shooting range, or were there any questions or comments related to that?
Matt, what about the two things, signage? I know you guys were had ordered that, and then the other piece was management. But I know you guys had somebody up there last summer. Was there an intent to, kind of have somebody up there helping out this summer as well?
Yeah, so signs still in the process of, as our regulations continue to change, signs are still there, and we're having to insert new verbiage and language that reflect some of the new regulations that have even changed since last year. Last year, we had a change in regulations where it required the use of a hunting or fishing license to utilize any state wildlife area in Colorado. This year, that's adapting again in that they are passing new legislations that will allow an access pass, so something that's not a hunting license or a fishing license, and will still be permitted for use of state wildlife areas. So we're adapting that. We don't want to have to duplicate or triplicate processes, and so we're trying to be efficient about how we're ordering these things up and not have a bunch of little carrots or tandems in there as we add additional regulations or change things around. With regard to personnel to help us up on the range, this summer we have approval for another temporary position. Actually, if the funding pans out right, we've received funding. We should receive funding for 2 temporary positions that'll help work with the area staff. Between those 2 and our current full-time staff, same thing. We're expecting probably a hot, dry summer, looking like it's going to be another significant drought year. We're being told by some of the fire experts and forecasters that we should predict fire restrictions early on this year. So we're kind of ramping up, getting ready to ensure that personnel is on site, and we'll be, helping make sure that people are being smart about what they're doing, verify that we're not using ammunition or firearms that are not permitted on the shooting range, and making sure that people are staying safe when they're operating on there.
Noted. Has there been any progress or further discussion about tying closure of the range to fire restrictions? In last summers, I think we had many citizens under the impression that when we got stage 2 fire restrictions, that would trigger an automatic closure of the range. That did not happen, and apparently is not in sort of the operating plan for the range. Are there fire hazard sort of triggers that would cause closure of the range that we could kind of talk to the public about?
Certainly. Mayor Kane, you're correct that we've continued to have discussions with county sheriffs, and not, this one falls within Eagle County, and I keep in fairly close contact with Sheriff Van Beek during the fire seasons. I utilize some of the local personalities as well. Chief Thompson, we touch base on a lot of those things. In addition to that, we've been bouncing some of these ideas and this process off of the other sheriffs, specifically in Garfield County with Sheriff Alario. We've been talking with him about how we operate CPW ranges in all capacities. For our hard stop, that's guaranteed range closure is typically on a stage 3. That stage 3 fire bans, that's where we're halting a lot of operations on everything. That's kind of where, they're going to the extent of, in the federal language, they're shutting forests down to anybody even being on those lands. We're under the kind of the same guidance where under stage 3 fire concern is so grave, it's so great that we're not allowing people to be up there, doing anything that may pose a risk. Stage 2 is a different beast in that, stage 2 we enter stage 2 in Eagle County as we're in stage 1, and we have red flag warnings. Red flag warnings elevate the fire restrictions to stage 2. And we've had that discussion with the sheriff. We have multiple ranges, only one CPW operated range, but multiple shooting ranges, multiple public shooting ranges within Eagle County. In discussions with the sheriff, we assess those on a case-by-case scenario. And as stage 2 rolls around, or as red flag warnings under stage 1 come into play, what we've been doing, the way we've been operating is kind of a standing order to visit and visit, the day that we know it's coming, to ensure that our communication is strong and that we're making the best informed decision. Those decisions are based on what the current fire situation is like locally, geographically. And in addition to that, trying to weigh that cost benefit that we've discussed in the past of displacing some of these firearms enthusiasts onto adjacent lands, whether it's private or public, that haven't been improved and mitigated for the risk of fire. Last thing we want to do is create a problem by moving somebody into an area that hasn't been cleared of brush or doesn't have proper mitigation efforts in place, and end up with a similar result or worse result.
Okay. Well, Matt and Ryan, I appreciate this conversation. The time is flying here. I think, a really interesting topic for council, if I may, is to have some conversation about the future of Lake Christine and trail and all of the planning work that is sort of going on. And I can tell you, I had, a personal conversation with JT Romansky and Matt about revisiting Lake Christine. I think I'm putting this mildly, but Lake Christine has really not lived up to its potential. I'm being kind. We thought we'd have championship trout. We have championship goldfish up at the Lake Christine right now. I think there have been conversations, and I think JT seemed more than willing to look in to the possibility of reopening the conversation about increasing the dam height, doing further excavation, building a bigger, more effective water body that would offer longer term recreation. We just really need to get back and revisit what that thing's about and clean it up and make it a more attractive recreational amenity for not only our community, but all of kind of Western Colorado that would like to come and visit. So, I know that's a mouthful, but I'd love to have some conversation here about how we might move forward with kind of rethinking the whole concept of the lake and Lake Christine. I mean, the options obviously range from giving up the ghost on a water feature and replanting, excavating, cleanup, whatever that may entail, or doing the full scale kind of original vision. And I know there were dam and structural safety issues that were involved in that. But if you could maybe talk about whether there's an opportunity for us to engage with CPW and revisit the vision really for Lake Christine and the role that it may play in the community, that'd really be a welcome conversation to have right now.
Certainly. For starters, I don't think that the book was ever closed. I don't think it's reopening anything. This has been an ongoing discussion internally for staff since I've been here, which is over a decade now. We've constantly been managing that. The management has changed on the basis of the structural integrity of that dam. And we've been pointed in different directions. As it currently exists, it's being held, less than capacity. Because they're trying to determine what that structural integrity is and if it poses a risk for breach or something else. We hired a couple new folks in our dam safety engineering section here, and they started this past fall in October. And I'm fairly optimistic. I've met him a couple times. He's been on site more times in the last 6 months than I've seen any of our dam safety staff on site in the last 6 years. And so it's definitely a high priority of our capital program. And his tact here, he's trying to get caught up to speed on some of the things we've collected. Now, I believe it's 4 years worth of piezometer data, which measures the level of the water inside the dam itself. And he's trying to get caught up on what those readings mean and trying to capture what that means from a perspective of the structural integrity. The second part to it is that there's some outstanding seeps that are occurring up above Two Rivers Road. The piezometers aren't correlating with what's going on with those seeps. So he's wanting to go through and trying to identify ways of monitoring those seeps to see what those mean. If those are secondary springs that are just outside of the scope of the lake operation, or what they are. Last thing we want to do is if there's a situation there or something that's going to cause a mudslide, a slide like happened a few years back where the hillside eroded down across Two Rivers Road, we don't want to exacerbate an existing situation. So right now we're waiting on our capital program and the dam safety engineers to give us the direction on what we're allowed to do, kind of provide that framework with what we can do. From there, we can start discussing, if the verdict is that we can manage it as a lake, then the next discussion becomes what kind of a lake we're managing it for. Historically, that lake has been managed as what we call a put and take fishery. It's one where we stock it with a lot of trout and make it available for the public. We put the fish in there and allow the public to take them out of there. It's an opportunity driven type of resource where, our intent is not to put those fish in there and grow them big. We want to put them in there and create an opportunity that doesn't exist on the Frying Pan River or the Roaring Fork Rivers. People can use bait to fish there versus flies and lures, and they can keep whatever fish they catch. It doesn't have a size restriction or a limit on some of those things. It's got the statewide bag limit of 4 trout, but it creates an opportunity for people to harvest fish and take them home as table fare. So that's how we've done it historically. Not saying that we would continue to do that in the future, but it's an option. Another option would be to manage it as more of a highly restricted kind of trophy type fishery where we're trying to grow fish of quality, not quantity. We have that already serves in a lot of our waters around here. So we just have to weigh the cost benefit to our local publics and see what makes the most sense. If we end up going the other route and we're told that we cannot fill the lake, then, obviously right now it's still going to have water. We have several springs in there, but we'd want to manage it in the capacity of creating some sort of a riparian habitat. It attracts a lot of birds. Without even trying, we have dozens of species. We've received several calls from birders and birding organizations all across actually the Western United States that come specifically to look at some of the birds that are coming there and the concentrations we have. So I think we can repurpose it into a property that kind of showcases some of that aspect, fairly unique to some of the areas in the Roaring Fork as well. So those are some options. Again, I don't know what the timeline is on our capital program there, but I do know that they've made several site visits and we're looking at reevaluating here again before summer gets going. So.
Cool. We'd like to stay in touch with you about that, Gary.
Well, I was just going to say, I'd love to find a way to do a partnership about this and, try to find a way to not expedite it, but move it along faster so we could come up with a determination of what the dam is all about. So we can then, work with you guys on planning what the next steps are, because I do believe it's a great resource. Yes, I go out there and I do see a lot of waterfowl and other things, but I also see the monster goldfish that are growing in there. And so it could be more, it could be just different. And I just would hope that the one thing you could leave with is trying to get people to move it along quicker so we don't wait too long on, figuring out, obviously what the dam structure is all about so we can move forward with, because that to me leads into your next discussion on trails and stuff is trying to find a strategic partnership and a strategic plan for that area because, with the pandemic, I go up there a ton and I went up there a ton last summer. And, you look at it from Lake Wistine on, people go everywhere because there's no, there's some trails, but there's so many roads and so many other access points and you can walk all over the place that I would love to figure out a way to work with CPW, with the town to try to find a way to strategically place trails so people don't go all over the place. People stay out of the areas that you're concerned about and, kind of and Lake Christine's one of them. I think if you make that a really great destination, people will want to find a way to connect to that. So anyway, I just want to find a way that we can expedite it to work with you guys on it in a strategic way.
Thanks. I appreciate the comments. And I'll be fairly candid. You know, I when it comes to the lake and assessing the structural integrity there, I mean, that's something that, you know, I've spoken to and I've heard from internally for years now. And to be quite honest, it's something that should have already occurred. I mean, given the time frame from when it first began, we should have already reached that resolution. You know, we had some staff in places that we were charging them with making that decision, and they opted not to, and it's kind of been punted. And really, they're the only ones internally that have that expertise and are capable of doing it. The new, you know, they've since gone on, and we have some new staff in place, and so it's unfortunately it's kind of like starting over. The promise with the new staff is that they are ambitious. They do understand, you know, what we're up against, both the town and local staff, and they're working with us. They're definitely making movement, forward progress on something that has sat stale for several years. You know, one thing that's weighing in all of our minds for local staff, for our engineers out of Denver, is that we definitely we don't want to discount the importance of that, the integrity of that dam, though. If we make a decision and we go to fill that and something were to happen, we don't ever want to put in jeopardy, you know, life or any resources or anything else. We know that Two Rivers Road is, you know, the infrastructure there. We don't want to jeopardize any of that moving forward, just because we were getting a little antsy and wanted to catch a fish next year. So we're trying to prioritize that and weigh some of the cost benefit on some of that as well. Moving into, well, I guess before I go anywhere else real quick, does any other comments or questions following up on that?
Matt, just real quick, could you comment the additional testing on the dam in the location of the springs would be some additional piezometers that they could monitor for a while? Isn't that correct, or was it something different?
It's something different, and I don't know the proper terminology to speak to it exactly. It's not a piezometer, it's something similar. It'll measure the discharge there. Right now, we're able to tell if it's running more or less, but we don't know how much more, how much less, and what it correlates to. So they have a way of doing it. We've been working with the water commissioner as well to try to figure out, and the state dam safety engineer to determine what that, you know, what it looks like. And again, I don't want to speak out of term because I don't know the technical aspect of it, but it's something separate from those piezometers that we currently have on the dam.
But it can get a fairly accurate reading and tell us the story of those springs and whether it's coming from the dam or it's spring fed and maybe not something we need to be as concerned about.
Correct. I don't know if it, I don't believe that the objective is to, I don't think it has the capacity to tie it back to, you know, to the dam per se, or tell us where that water's exactly coming from. I think what it will be able to do is measure the discharge. And as we fluctuate the level of the lake, it can tell us if the discharge increases or decreases as a result of that. And we can tie those two together and make a better informed decision on this is related to the lake, or this is a spring that operates independent of what we're doing with the lake. Has no implications if we retain water or not. So.
Okay. Great. With the last few minutes, maybe we could just talk about the overall management. Gary, I think you brought up the trail piece, or we could start there. Thanks, Matt.
Perfect. Yeah, going back to the trail topic, you know, that's something that as an agency, we've been kind of looking at a lot of our properties and trying to determine what the appropriate use is on those properties. Whether we're weighted more towards recreation, more towards conservation on the wildlife resource perspective. And this property is no different. It sits in close proximity to a major municipality in the Roaring Fork Valley, lots of foot hiking use in the area. And we've, as staff, we're trying to identify if and where, trail systems are appropriate on the property. The other portion of it is written into the management plan. The property was paid for, with federal funding dollars specifically designed to protect deer and elk winter range. It was purchased with that in mind. It was designed the way we manage it, all of our regulations, even as simple as when we irrigate it and when we cut hay up there is all designed at attracting and holding deer and elk on the property. A lot of that stems right into our our larger picture of deer and elk management in the Roaring Fork Valley and even beyond. And we're in an era where we have fewer deer and fewer elk than we've seen in better part of 3 decades. I mean, we're at about 60% of the animals in our elk herd that we had here in the early 2000s, and we're not exactly sure why. We can't get the elk herd to grow, even when hunting licenses have been limited and for female harvest essentially nullified. And so we're trying to determine, what some of these implications are. We have this counterpart study going on outside of Carbondale and trying to gather some information on that. With regard to how it influences our management of the property, we still want to hold true to conservation of deer and elk habitat, specifically winter range, and spring habitat where those animals are in need of some help. So we're wanting to definitely be mindful of that. We've been starting some discussions. I think we have one coming up here with town and with Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers coming up here in, I believe it's 2 weeks maybe, and looking at addressing just that, trying to identify areas, whether it's on the state property or even adjacent parcels, where we need to focus our efforts on improving trails and keeping people in areas where it's appropriate and we want people to be and enjoy the resource, and areas that are maybe more critical for habitat. I think instead of just looking at it from the perspective of just the state property, it's a discussion that I'd like to really have this. Hopefully it's a good kickoff with some of our federal partners, the town, everybody else, and find out, because I think we're going to have to leverage some of this and find out, which parcels are truly the ones. There may be some, for lack of a better term, sacrificial areas, where for deer and elk, maybe it's something that we develop it into a recreation type of an area and focus more use there in order to close down trails on some adjacent parcels. And we just have to figure out which ones make the most sense for habitat versus which ones can be converted into some and kind of direct recreation towards those. So obviously those are discussions that need to be had with some of the federal partners. And I know we're talking here, but in the realm of when we're considering deer and elk management, even the state property, that's not really the landscape style setting that we want to address some of those topics. So I'm hoping that this conversation here in 2 weeks will be a good kickstart for where we go and what conversations are in the future, and what our trail management, trail planning looks like for the next year, half decade, et cetera.
Matt, not to put you on the spot, but do you have any comments on the reseeding? Sort of ties into trail and the overall management of the area, that reseeding effort that we did a couple of years back, and what the progress of that is.
Certainly. Most of the reseeding that was done on our volunteer day were the brush species in areas that we couldn't access mechanically. And I was up there with our property technician this last fall and winter, and we were actually just noting we weren't sure how it was going to take. We were actually planning at the wrong time of year. We're still in the middle of a drought cycle, and we were optimistically hoping that maybe 5 to 10% of our seed would take. It's just it's tough conditions to try to get those plants to grow in. And we were really pleased with how much seed is actually taking. Most of those brush species that we planted take 5 to 10 years to show some significant growth and generation. But a lot of those areas that we planted, if you go in there and start looking around in the rocks, there's a lot of sagebrush and rabbitbrush that already germinated and is taking. All of it's going to be beneficial to the resource. It's going to be beneficial to help hold a lot of that hill in place. That's one thing I'll touch on real quickly that I neglected to speak to earlier about lake management. Another factor that we're trying to take into consideration is at the request of CDPHE when we talked about some of the flood potential in the area. and Lake Christine was identified as a basin that should be in some regard used or potentially managed for as a catch basin that could catch any kind of a flood potential coming down across the backside of the shooting range as it did back in August of 2019. So, they didn't want us to do something with lake management that would preclude the use of that as some sort of a catchment to catch any kind of debris that would otherwise flow down into the Roaring Fork River. So we're being mindful of that as well.
Okay. Well, I guess maybe to recap, I just have a few things that I jotted down back to Lake Christine. And it really is not just the lake proper, but maybe the whole sort of Lake Christine State Wildlife Area. But, it seems like the opportunities that are before us are, one, to improve dam safety, come up with a defined trail system, improve the quality of fishing, perhaps more picnic spots, landscape improvements, birding, and maybe some natural interpretive options. So I don't think it would be the town's intention to dump that all on CPW. I think that, if we want these things, we should be willing partners to team up on a financial front and, participate with you on visioning and planning. So I would really encourage us to keep working at it and find a way forward to improve that asset up there, because it's, we have a burgeoning community here and lots of demand for outdoors and quality outdoor experiences. And, that area could really deliver it. We just need to give it some tender loving care up there.
I agree, and I appreciate that. And I apologize for being the one talking at you so much. If it's beneficial for me to make another appearance at a later date here and provide more time, adequate time for some more detailed conversation coming back my way, I'm more than happy to do so. So let me know what fits your schedule and what, what would serve you better. So as neighbors, I hope to continue this relationship.
Yeah, likewise. I think relative to the talking, so what we do is give you about 2 hours of agenda and 35 minutes to talk through it. So that's kind of the product of that, I think. So council, any comments, questions for Matt Yamashita at CPW at this meeting? I do like the idea of a follow-up, and Gary's quite an asset. He's the PH3 trail master for our community. It'd be really neat to take advantage of his skill set and talk about what we could do to really better define the pedestrian experience up there, and keep working with you about how we can be good neighbors for Lake Christine. I know we got a bunch of avid mountain bikers that would like to talk to you, but that's for another day. Okay. Comments, questions?
I'd like to say thanks for coming out, talking to us. Unfortunately, 45 minutes probably isn't enough to hash out anything significant, so a follow-up would be great.
Yeah, let's plan that. All right. With that will conclude our work session part of our agenda tonight. We will transition to our regular meeting. I have to ask our town clerk whether we can just stay on this line. Do we have to reconnect, Pam? Or are we good to just stay on this call?
You are good to stay on this call, sir.
Okay, great. All right. So wish I could say we had time for a little break here, but it doesn't look like we do. So just hang in. So at this point, do we have to notify the TV station that we're gone to the regular meeting, or we can just keep rolling forward here?
I think you can just call the regular meeting to order, sir, at whatever time, and I'll do a roll call and we'll be good to go.
So with that, we were now transitioned to our regular council meeting, and the first order of business, once again, is called the meeting to order, which I've just done, and we'll do a roll call once again for council attendance, and then we'll move forward with the evening's agenda.
Okay, thank you, sir. Let's begin with Ryan Slack.
Here.
Thank you, Ryan. Elise Huddle.
Present.
Thank you, Elise. David Knight.
Here.
Thank you, David. Glenn Drummond.
Here.
Thank you, Glenn. Bill Infante.
Here.
Thank you, Bill. Gary Tenenbaum.
Bill here.
Thank you, Gary. And Bill King.
Here.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. Okay, first order of business is our consent agenda, which is the minutes from March 23rd Town Council meeting. Is there a motion to approve consent agenda?
Mayor, I move that the town council approves the consent agenda items as presented.
Great, thank you. Okay, moved and seconded. Voice vote on this one, as I recall, Jeff, is good. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
nays? Great, consent agenda is hereby approved. At this point in our meeting, we will open the mics for public participation. This is a call to the public. It's time for anybody that's out there watching our town council meeting that would like to address council or raise issues for the council or staff. This is your chance to call in. So please limit your comments to 3 minutes and identify yourself with name and address. Susan Philp will give you a little bit more information about how you can call in and address council.
Okay, and we do have one email comment to read into the record, but while we're doing that, we'll give people an opportunity to contact us. You can call us at 1-253-215-8782. And the webinar ID is 940-1359-5413. And the easiest thing to do is there's a link on the first page of the agenda when you pull it down from the agenda center, and you can simply access that link. And the mayor has indicated before that if you come in a little late, he'll still allow an opportunity for you to talk. And we did get one person who has a comment by email that I think Pam is going to read into the record.
Okay, if you're ready, I'll go ahead and do that. This email is from David Parker, no address given. He writes, I don't think I will be able to attend to make the public comment time of tomorrow's meeting, but would like to bring up the following item. I read in the paper recently that Basalt was to receive some unexpected stimulus funds from the feds. I would like to see if we can refund a recycling drop-off location. Many of us don't have neighborhood curbside pickup, and our only option for recycling cans, bottles, cardboard is to drive to the Pitkin landfill. I find myself most often just putting stuff that should be recycled in my dumpster. I understand that recycling can be expensive, but if Basalt is really interested in climate issues, I would like them to address this issue. Thanks, David Parker.
Well, I think we should thank Mr. Parker for the comments. They're, you know, at least from this counselor, they're welcomed, and you know, I think it's something we ought to give serious consideration to. That's an astute sort of observation and comment. I don't know if any other counselors want to respond to that, but that's, I guess, all I would say. So thank him. Any other indications, Susan, call-ins?
No, I don't have any emails, and I don't think Pam has anything else. So I think we're good to go for now.
All righty, thank you. Okay, with that, I will turn to mayor and council reports and comments. So floor is open for any counselor. We're going to get to manager here in a minute. So are there comments from council?
Can I just talk?
Well, I'd like to kind of make a few comments. One, as you know, I now serve as the vice chair for RAFTA, I honestly don't know how I became vice chair, but I am now the vice chair. I was a a good law-abiding member. Now I'm the vice chair, so it's really a extraordinarily worthwhile assignment, and I really enjoy working with the staff and the board. So just a couple things to keep you informed about what's going on with public transportation and RAFTA in the Valley. Big items are that RAFTA is now involved and will be this fall, late summer and fall, in the construction of another underpass, much like our Basalt underpass at 27th Street, where the big RAFTA stop is. And they've learned a lot from Basalt, and they've learned a lot in terms of the dimension and lighting, and it's really going to be quite an attractive improvement for Glenwood Springs. The RAFTA is continuing to operate at 50% seating capacity, which, as you can well imagine, puts quite a strain on the rolling stock. So there have to be many buses. This is kind of the worst sort of diagram you could draw for a business, where you decrease capacity and you increase cost and you decrease the fare box and other sources of revenue. But RAFTA's done a great job of aggressively pursuing grant assistance, and so they're doing very well. 50% will stay in place for a while, probably until we get to a blue stage. 75% capacity, I think, will be permitted for rides of less than 15 minutes. So that's going to help in Aspen. And if we still are under some sort of COVID restriction, circulation back and forth between Willits and the town of Basalt, should we go that way as part of our facilities master plan, would be permitted to go to 75%. RAFTA's done a good job at vaccinating employees, and particularly the drivers and the frontline personnel have, for the most part, been vaccinated. RAFTA has 385 full-time employees, and 212 as of last week were vaccinated. And there are people that were scheduled for appointments for more, so that number will just improve. And Maroon Bells is back and alive and well. And there's an arrangement has been made for people that want to ride the bus down. If you do the Crested Butte hike and you come back to Maroon Bells, you will have to have a reservation to get on a bus to ride back into town. That was never the case. You could probably just on an empty seat get on there, but now you're going to need a ticket and a reservation. So RAFTA has a very informative program called Forward 2040. It's not our 2030. They're looking out 10 more years than we are. But I would like to get Kurt Ravenschlag to come talk to us at a work session, so you can see all that RAFTA is planning. It's quite extensive. So that's one item. The other is that I'm not going to steal Ryan's fire. He can provide more detail on this. I'll just mention that Elise and myself and Ryan and Bill Ray had an encounter to talk about how we improve basically communication for the community. We reviewed kind of where we are and what we have in place and where the shortfalls are and how we could make improvements, but I'll let Ryan fill that in later. So that's something that we're going to continue to work on. There'll be lots of follow-up, and I look forward to kind of a more formalized kind of presentation for council on how do we buff up our communication strategy and effectiveness in getting through to our public. So that's it on my end. So that's any other comments from council? Elise?
I just am enjoying our spring weather, and it reminded me of the opportunity, hopefully, to get back together again in person and do another offsite. I think there were some things that came up in the original offsite that are worth another conversation, especially now that we've been a council together for a year and we're sort of more aware of each other's, opportunities and visions and strengths and weaknesses. So I would love to start thinking about maybe doing another in-person offsite. And I think that it dovetails really nicely with the Basalt Forward 2030 and seeing how these potential capital improvements can fit into our vision and vice versa.
That's welcomed comments. And I know informally, I think I asked the question to our town manager every time I see him about when we're going to meet in face. And I think the thinking now is like the first meeting in June, we'll be back together under a roof and on a face-to-face basis. And, I was hoping it'd be sooner than that, but I think given the state of play, unfortunately, what's now become known as the fourth wave and kind of where we are with this this virus, that looks like a fairly realistic kind of projection. I don't know if you've had additional thoughts, Ryan, you'd want to mention to council.
No, Mayor. I think we're kind of sticking with that, assuming that allows people time to get vaccinated now that it's opened up, and then we're going to be transitioning from an audio-visual standpoint into potentially this hybrid. So that takes a little bit of time to work on that as well, because we will still need to limit presence. We can't pack that room, so we're going to need to have some options, either to meter people in or perhaps allow call-in options still. So.
Yeah. But at least you're probably talking about just not necessarily you're talking about just getting together rather than a formal council meeting, just doing coffees or some way that we can.
Well, I'm excited to meet in person for council meetings, but what I was referencing was more of the sort of strategic offsite that we did last year up at the ranch off of the Frying Pan.
Sure, yeah.
And following up on some of the outcomes from that we had talked about having further conversations on, and I think some of them we have touched on, throughout the course of the year, but I think there's other things that we could still have a bigger conversation about. And as I was saying, dovetailing into this Basalt Forward 2030, talking about what our council vision is, and then hopefully, creating a framework so that when that, facility study and capital improvement plan comes back, we can say, look how well this fits into our vision.
Great. Well, yeah, I think you probably have a lot of support for that. So let's work towards that. If there are no, Bill Infante.
Yes, I will defer to Glenn since he had his hand up first, however.
I see it. So
the only thing I wanted to bring up is it kind of segues to everything you're talking about, from bus capacity to everything, is encouraging the public to get vaccinated. I went and got my shot, got the Johnson & Johnson. I know that one's been canceled now or been held off. I didn't have any crazy adverse effects. I think the only path forward for us to get back at any type of normalcy is to encourage everybody to just do that one little thing. Go get vaccinated. It's going to make it so that we can meet in person as a council. We can have 100% capacity on RAFTA. Every single thing we just talked about and all the restrictions we have, the one thing that's going to cure this is getting people vaccinated. So that's the biggest thing I want to state is don't be afraid of it. It's not some crazy conspiracy theory. Just do your little part. Do that little thing.
Yeah. Bill?
Got a couple things, but to kind of echo Glenn's statement, I ran into Lisa Robiano. Many of you may know her. She works down at the medical clinic, and just kind of asked her about her impressions of kind of the state of COVID in Basalt. And she's been very impressed and very, very complimentary about and the good folks over at Eagle County are doing, and is also encouraged by the rates of vaccine but at the same time is frustrated by some holdouts, and I guess would encourage all to get vaccinated and to help ensure the safety of our community. I had a couple other things. Following up on a request from the last meeting, thank you to Susan Phillips for her call this afternoon with updates on Basalt Center Circle or Clark's Market. I look forward to discussing that with kind of all council as plans move forward, but I'm very, very encouraged that there is light at the end of the tunnel and we may have a great project for that place. I am still interested in the art base property that we purchased and what we're thinking about that. I'm going to use that as a segue. I walked through the art base last week with Sky, and I think this is going to be one of the greatest additions to Midland Avenue. I am so pleased that they will remain central to our arts and culture offer in Basalt, and just very enthusiastic for the opening that will be in late May with a formal, more public opening sometime in July, if I've gotten my dates correct. But I guess I had a question for town council. If at the outset we were willing to invest town resources to buy the land that the art base was going to occupy, but now isn't, is there a way that we could free up additional resources to invest in the visual arts in the same way that we did with Takaw? So if we ponied up $165,000 for that parcel, in principle, we were willing to invest $165,000 in the art base. And I wonder if we can't consider that for them in their new location. The other question is also related to funding, but it's kind of the status of the River Park development RETA. I wanted to confirm that the art base will indeed still be the beneficiary of the RETA that is planned for the Basalt River Park LLC parcel. And so we can get to that at a different time, but then quick refrain on Mountain Pact activities. Anna sent a note to Elise Huttle and me thanking us as the Basalt Council for our leadership in passing the resolution in support of the President Biden pause on oil and gas drilling. She's really thrilled with the response that she's gotten. A lot of other municipalities are passing similar resolutions. When I spoke to her about a week or two ago, Ridgeway had also signed on. They're very, very progressive in the environmental sphere. Their Mayor Clark has been a real advocate. Mountain Pact hosted a short webinar on Monday for the purpose of looking at 2 executive orders that Biden passed in his first 90 days. One of them was the pause on oil and gas, and we all know about that. The other is an initiative known as 30 by 30, which is an effort that is now being led to protect and conserve 30% of the United States by 2030. And there are a number of opportunities for us to engage. It is very much of a locally led initiative. They're working towards inclusive nature conservation, honoring the sovereignty of tribal and indigenous communities. And I think Basalt is probably well placed to contribute to this when the criteria for conservation are advanced by Secretary Haaland that we will probably already meet or exceed. And among the interventions that I left the group with, and there were probably about 50 people on the call, I talked about, kind of municipal and county opportunities to simply pass strategies as we have that provide for environmental and natural resource conservation. And I think we can probably take a look at this. I fully support what Elise suggested in terms of an offsite. And one of the things for discussion would be discussion of our own environmental strategic objective, which does some great things for energy and for power, but it doesn't do quite as much for biodiversity, habitat, ecosystem conservation, and so on. But there was also a notion of inventorying the land and water resources that are already conserved within the town of Basalt and the immediate vicinity. I appealed to the county commissioners who were on the call to ease the bureaucracy associated with the dedication of land for in conservation easement. And so that is something that I have heard about from a number of developers that has kind of impaired their ability to dedicate more land. They say it's expensive and really burdensome. So at a county level, if the county commissioners can do something to facilitate the dedication of land, that would be great. And then there is a request for us to simply support the executive order known as 30 by 3030. And Anna's going to get us more information about that. But it's really, she's been doing some great advocacy on behalf of the 11 states comprising the Mountain West. They've got many dozen, I was going to say hundreds, but it's many, many dozens of municipalities and counties that are joining in this effort. So all very good, and I am very pleased that Elise and I have been tag teaming on this. And that's about it.
And I think my understanding was that Anna was going to let us know if there was a recording available, and if it is available, we will certainly pass that along to Ryan for the council's benefit.
Yes,
Great.
There is a recording, and she will make it available.
Excellent, thanks. Additional council comments? Thank you, Bill, for that. Ryan, you're up. It's the manager's report. So looks like you got 3 items on here.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Actually 4. I wanted to start off by introducing Catherine Christoph, and she's waving her hand there. She is the new hire for the town, our town engineer. So a much welcomed position for us, much needed. So welcome, Catherine. I'm sure we'll be seeing lots more of you. And so don't know if you wanted to just say hi. I'll give you a moment.
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm excited to be part of the town. I know a few of you. I come by way of Pickens County, but have been in the Valley working as an engineer since 2006. So yeah, I'm excited to be part of the town of Basalt, and feel free to give me a call or email me if you all have any questions for me or want some input on what you're up to. So thanks. It's nice to meet you all virtually and hopefully in person soon.
Yeah. Well, welcome. Great to see you. I appreciate you being here tonight. There'll be no shortage of questions coming your way and opportunities. So welcome to the team here, and we really look forward to working with you, and we're pleased you're with us. So all right, Ryan.
I'm sorry, I gotta jump in. She's a traitor. That's my other job.
She was
jump ship. I only got a year left with you to work here.
She had it with
yes, no.
She was done with that.
Thanks, Gary. I'll miss you.
Well, you are awesome. I'm so stoked that you're part of the town of Basalt. Thanks.
So yeah, thank you, Catherine. So moving on, we did, Bill mentioned that Elise, Bill, and Bill Ray and myself, we got together on Friday and just talked about town communication strategy. And I think it was a really productive conversation. It gave me time to prepare for the conversation and jot down the items that we are addressing with regard to communication. And I think that there are a number of things that we do today. I kind of grouped things into two different categories. One is sort of a project-based communication, and then the other is just your standard regular communication. The project-based communication really seems to be where we ramp up and have really pointed communications that are meaningful and kind of taking people through projects, step by step. So a few examples that we've done in the recent past, some were thrust upon us, like the Lake Christine fire, the subsequent flooding that occurred, then of course the mitigation that we did with that flooding, COVID being another one. And then of course we got the Tabor issue that we had worked through that just required a lot of explaining and outreach to the community. And then we're now working on, or finished the master plan, another one that was project-based, and then the Basalt Forward 2030. So we're really looking forward to engaging the public and really trying to get feedback that's meaningful, so the council can then make some good informed decisions. That being said, there's always room for improvement, and so I think where we decided, there could be some further discussion is, it was an interesting distinction that Bill Ray had made that, websites, Facebook, things like that, they're really sort of an end to communication. So it's a place that you go when perhaps directed, but it's not sort of informational to let the general public know that there's information forthcoming or being sort of active or engaging with them. And so working through some of those, a couple ideas that emerged, as you know, we've been doing the video updates. And so I think those have been well received and a successful way, especially during COVID, just to put a face out there and do some updates. I think a few more of those where we take them in smaller bits. So doing more videos.
Good looking face that we're putting out there. He just said there's a face, so.
Right. Sorry, I omitted that. Yeah, so, and kind of taking it on a topic by topic. So if we're able to engage about the pool, say, we can drive a minute or two in detail for the public, and if that's all they want to know about, because often geographically, somebody in one part of town may not be interested in, potholes or some smaller project in another part of town. And so if we're able to, do those and really, kind of keep them as smaller sound bites that can keep people's attention, that could be a good place to start. We also, wanted to engage. One of the things that Bill Ray brought up is often people, they enjoy being asked, like what's your feeling on X? And you can do small, surveys to outreach that are maybe one question, two questions that just gather a little bit of feedback, not so much to guide council's decision, but you can just get some general sentiment from the community on a given topic. So that was another one. And with this Bang the Table that we used, it's a platform that has a number of tools that I think we've only touched the surface. Is potentially a way to engage in that way. So you can do surveys, and people, as Elise has become more familiar with that, indicated that you don't necessarily have to sign on to it. There are ways to respond or interact with it that don't require adding your name or email or what have you to it. And so I think what we would like to do, as Bill alluded to, was let's bring this back and we'll have some further council discussion on it. It may be a good topic for a council retreat, in fact, and just memorialize what we're doing, some things we want to work on, and then proceed from there. Get buy-in from council generally on that. So Bill or Elise, did you have anything to add? I'd probably just leave it there for the moment.
Yeah, that's good. I think the shorter videos, more topically oriented, is really a strong takeaway that I thought was valuable, and use of email blast and MailChimp and some of these other kind of capabilities that we have would be really worth pursuing. So that's what I intend to do with it.
Good.
And the sound bites are really good because, if people have 30 seconds and they're playing with their phone, we can update them on something instead of losing their attention if we're trying to do too much at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So yeah, thank you both again for being willing to participate in that and helping that along. So the next thing briefly that I'll talk about is just an update on broadband. So we've been through several times the efforts underway over here in downtown Basalt that are part of the grant and the cooperative arrangement with Pickens County. And as a piggyback to that, with the new public works facility, obviously we're going to need internet service over there. So we've been working with Holy Cross Energy, and we have an initial proposal from them to extend fiber to that site. The really neat thing about that is it'll piggyback on their current build, and we would be bringing essentially a line from the Hook Spur area, and that line would come through the Basalt Industrial Park and Design Center, and so it would give an opportunity for fiber in that area as it travels toward the Public Works facility. So that's has some potential to add a different option or a new option for those businesses. And then as we bring it through closer toward the Public Works facility, we're going to pass by the Willits Bend area. We're going to pass by the Aspen Ski Co housing. And then, at that point in time, you're in fairly close proximity to the mobile home park that exists over there. So, I think it has the possibility of what is, intended as a use for the town. Initially, we, talked about just adding those additional fiber capabilities for others. So more to come on that, and as we learn, but once again, Holy Cross Energy has been a really great partner so far on that. The other piece to that part of town, there was some developer obligation on the part of Tree Farm, and then in part for Willits to interconnect the lights from Elgibel Road to Original Road. And that would be a fiber run along Highway 82. So we have been in discussions with CDOT, Eagle County, the Tree Farm folks, and then of course us, just furthering that project along. So it looks like that's gaining momentum and will be a build that is going to happen. The main purpose is to sync the lights so that as we're adding traffic to Highway 82, that syncing those lights would be able to manage the friction that you get from the side when people are wanting to get onto the highway or off of the highway, and add to the efficiency of people. The main goal of CDOT is to keep people moving through. So that's a positive. With that, we would have some extra conduit in there that we would be able to do a fiber run to again reach other neighborhoods as you travel down 82, another backbone opportunity. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll update council as that progresses. And then the third thing I wanted to update on is our Basalt Forward 2030 project. So we are making progress on that, and we have had Cushing Terrell in town a few times now. So getting oriented with that team, that's been exciting. We did send out to council the project timeline and communication plan that's included in that. And so you can read through that, and you know, we're at a point now where it's sort of data collection, but intend to have some results in May, as we've discussed before. So they were out, as I said, initially March 18th and 19th. So they were at that point in time mostly picking up plans, kind of getting oriented with staff. Part of the team too is Holy Cross Energy and Core, because what we're looking at is the energy efficiency piece to our facilities. Then they came back out on March 31st through April 2nd. And at that point in time, they actually did the physical inspection of all of our town facilities. And so now they're back and working through that data and doing the report. In the meantime, town staff has been working with the town committees. As you recall, we will have a member each from the town committees, and then one from the Chamber of Commerce, for a total of 8 or 9 members to make up the Capital Needs Committee. And so by the end of this month, we will have that appointee from each of the committees represented, and sort of dovetailing with that. We have tonight on the agenda our the bylaws for this committee that just outlines the do's and don'ts, and sort of the reason for the committee and the makeup and that kind of thing. So making progress there. And then sort of next steps, as Cushing Carroll is working on the report, we will start to engage that committee in the middle of May. We're going to do with Cushing Carroll's assistance and that of Bill Ray and staff. We'll be talking to the committee as doing an orientation and outreach, things to expect throughout the process and that type of thing. And then we expect in late May to get a draft of the facility needs assessment, as well as space needs assessment. And that will help to inform the committee as they go and start creating the community outreach portion of this. So at that point in time, we'd have all of the facility information, and then of course using the master plan as a piece to that. So that's a general update of where we are. We will continue that, and you know, I think in the near term here, we'll be doing some more outreach to the community in a similar fashion, just to make sure we're bringing everybody along. So that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. Questions for our town manager on his report? Bill?
I just had a question, because in reading through kind of the targets for the Cushing Terrell assessment, it seemed like it was looking at like a lot of physical infrastructure. And in terms of capital needs, I wonder if they're going to look at other physical infrastructure that you've talked about, Bill, namely the Midland Avenue rehabilitation, or some kind of a facelift for that. But also, I wonder if they're going to be looking at any of the social infrastructure, such as investment in arts and culture, investment in education, investment in other social goods that we might want to contemplate as a capital investment.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So you're right. In this portion of the facility needs, that's specifically looking at the town-owned properties, the buildings that are situated on them. We want to take stock of that the condition, and then also look at the space needs, so that we can anticipate, as part of this discussion of, you know, and have that with the town of, you know, do we need to be thinking about improvements, upgrades, you know, what have you, to our facilities. The master plan is really the tool that we're using for some of the other things you named. There are 13 projects listed, Midland Avenue being one of them. Some of those social goods like, you know, investment in affordable housing, you know, green investments, And so I think all of those types of things are going to be captured as part of the process.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's a good answer. You know, I had the same apprehension that we were going to get absorbed in fixing up all of our existing physical plant and not have money left over for all the things that were more visionary things that were enumerated in the master plan: childcare, housing, downtown improvements, bus circulators. I mean, there are lots of non-capital intensive oriented. They're money intensive, but not capital asset oriented. So I think the answer was a good one, that, you know, that's the master plan is the guide for that. And this is just the capital piece, is just a piece of it. So.
And then will the capital needs committee be evaluating all of those other potential uses of funds? Because it kind of looked like from the Cushing-Terrell plan that Cushing-Terrell will look at facilities. Facilities leads directly to the development of language that'll be submitted to Eagle County on or before July 23rd. And it was kind of like, well, when does the rest of it all get discussed? And how does that get discussed? And where does council fit in on all that?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm following on Eagle County. I don't know that they're.
Well, this is the election related language that needs to be submitted, our expression of intent by July 23rd.
Yeah, so we will be having that, that, you know, it's both Eagle and Pitkin that we'll ultimately have to engage with if council so chooses. And I think that the committee will take up both. And Cushing-Terrell, yes, they are in one of their duties is to look at the capital needs. The other side is to help facilitate the discussion once we understand what those capital needs are, to you know, basically put all of the needs on the table, and that includes these visionary pieces, these social capital pieces, and start engaging and getting feedback from the capital needs group, but then also from the community. And that's where, you know, we will develop a survey and, you know, have some outreach and discussion with the community. And I think the end product is we've grouped all of this stuff together, and what emerges is a priority list of projects that may include, you know, facilities and or items that are found in the master plan.
Okay. Ryan, thank you. Good report. We move to presentations. The next piece up is a brief update on Eagle County and the Forest Service properties out by Crown Mountain. Actually, it's the original tree farm. We have Tree Farm 1. So it looks like Susan and Ryan were going to update us there.
Yeah. So I'll jump in, Mayor, if that's okay. Sure. And yeah, we just wanted to update council on this. We got a comment at the last meeting with regard to the Eagle County process that is underway. So basically the county has engaged with a consulting firm to do some listening sessions, which is phase 1 of the project. That would ultimately lead to, or not, an engagement by the county to pursue a land use on United States Forest Service property and or the Eagle County property that sits adjacent to it. The Farm Bill in 2018 basically contemplated Forest Service administrative parcels to be leased out for what they call consideration, and that consideration can be for cash or for in-kind. And so that could mean, I think in this case, what the Forest Service is really desperate for is housing for their employees. So it's a temporary housing. They do have some on the site today, but it's probably not adequate, and it's I think outdated at this point. So, I think what the Eagle County process set out to do on this first phase was to engage with certain stakeholders. So they reached out to Town of Basalt, so governments. They reached out to Pickens County. They had reached out to certain nonprofits as well as citizens. They did mention that it wasn't meant to be all-encompassing, so it wasn't the entire public, but they wanted to just do some initial discussions to, I think, ultimately be able to put some sideboards on the conversation. So are there any things out there that are deal killers? Are there any things they should be aware of as they proceed to a next step on the process? And so town was contacted, town staff participated in the middle of March and basically stuck to the master plan and just talked about what the master plan had intended for that area. We also heard from Eagle County Planning at the same time, and I included in the packet for council what that future land use map looks like. And I think one important distinction that we heard throughout is at this stage, this is not a land use process. So they weren't looking to come up with a final plan or an idea. They, again, just wanted to do some initial listening. And I think there will be several more bites at the apple as I understand. I think it's also important to mention that the report from this first phase will be presented to the Eagle County Commissioners on May 4th, I believe it is. And so they indicated that they would be happy to invite council to listen in on that, or come and present, perhaps during a work session or something like that at a council meeting. So with that, I think I'll leave it at that. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. Oh, the other thing that is included in the packet was the slides that were part of the presentation that we heard that day from the Eagle County consultant. So, and then finally, I guess I'll just mention, they did end up talking to 3 council members. So Mayor Kane, Bill Infante, and to Gary Tenenbaum. So they might be able to share their experience there.
Yeah, thanks. I had a good talk with Jason Janes from DHM, who is managing the listening post process for Eagle County and the Forest Service. And we really talked in general terms about the physical properties of the land, the lower piece, which obviously lends itself to a conservation character, and then the development parcel or the developable parcel of the upper land. And I was careful to not try to speak for town council without some kind of joint conversation, but I think I provided them my sort of take on the sort of history of the property and what they might encounter in terms of public sentiment about the project, and also kind of a sympathetic discussion about the predicament that White River National Forest find themselves into relative to housing and being able to keep staff and the other factors that are going to influence the ultimate resolution of the site. So it was a good non-committal conversation. So I don't know if Gary or Bill want to add any more to that. Okay.
Sure. I can add a few two cents on this.
Yeah, I would like to ask Gary and Mr. Infante for his opinion on that whole deal.
Okay.
Yeah. By way of background, there have been a couple discussions, and Gary's had some going back far further than me, but the conveyance and the disposition of this property offers an incredible opportunity to the town of Basalt and the other municipalities or cities and towns within the Roaring Fork Valley, as well as the two counties. And the 2018 Farm Bill has created a facility by which the U.S. Forest Service can now convey land either in kind, as Ryan noted, or they can lease it. And there are efforts to push forward the leasing authority beyond the 30 years that currently exists to a much longer leasehold that would provide for kind of a more creative public-private partnership. I, as well, Bill, didn't indicate any preconceived plan, but just see that the opportunities for us, for Basalt to participate, are very great. I encourage them to reach out to elected officials. In the listening sessions, from what I gather, there wasn't great representation of elected officials. The only person who participated was Dan Richardson. And I think what we bring is a very different perspective. We bring a lot of insight based upon the administration of our towns or the oversight of the town's strategy and vision. But we also have money that we can potentially bring in a variety of ways. And one way, if we're talking about the protection of the 40 acres in the floodplain, partnering with, say, the Roaring Fork Conservancy to really manage that for biodiversity, habitat protection would be a wonderful way to support a locally based NGO in a manner that serves our environmental and natural resource kind of goals and objectives. So I did speak with Jeff Schroll and with Jason Janes, and the opportunity is a little bit time bound in the sense that the 2018 Farm Bill sunsets in 2023. And so the time right now to hatch some kind of a plan, not necessarily execute it, but at least to conceive something, is very, very good. It also helps that we've got a lot of political tailwind behind us. The 2018 Farm Bill and the provisions that permit conveyance were pretty much authored by Michael Bennett. And Michael Bennett is up for election in 2022. So he also has a personal and, I think, broader interest in delivering some kind of project that will evidence the value of this authority and produce an environmental good. So, again, my interest is to be part of this discussion. And by that, I mean, I want Basalt to have a seat at the table so that we are part of the solution, that we can contribute to a great plan that will deliver some environmental and community goods that our public up and down the valley agree are going to be valuable. And so to that extent, I did encourage Jason and Jeff to reach broadly, not just to include the El Jebel Center of the Mid-Valley, which seems to have been where most of the participants came from in the listening sessions. But I suggested that we might want to reach up to Aspen, down to Glenwood, and more broadly to entertain things that the broad community wants, things that will serve them in the future. Jeff did offer to make himself available and to make DHM available to our council to give us a briefing and to hear from all council people. So I throw that out. Ryan Mahoney, that would, again, land in your lap to coordinate that for a future town council meeting. But I think that what they are contemplating is really fantastic, and it offers us a great opportunity to help shape the future of that parcel.
And I have a little different take than Bill Infante. I look at this parcel as still outside our, urban growth boundary. This is not necessarily going to be the best place for a very large development by any means. I really applaud Eagle County for listening. I think, you know, the reality is you do need to listen. You got to listen to your neighbors. You got to listen to, you know, they definitely reached out to land managers across the valley. I know some my staff and staff from other land management agencies were definitely included. And so, you know, Eagle County, to me, from what Jason Janes told me and what Kathleen Chandler Henry told me was, you know, they're listening now. There's no plan for anything. It's just they want to listen, and then they, you know, will hear from the consultants on a report. And yes, the county would definitely love to present to us. I think Ryan already mentioned that. And I think the town needs to be involved in this because we definitely have an urban growth boundary issue in this area. And there are other ways to solve affordable housing issues than just developing on every piece of land that we can get. And so, you know, for me, I definitely didn't speak for the town. I spoke from where the town's master plan is at. And so, you know, I think there's definitely some things that could be considered on the developable piece. I do believe that the piece down below is well used and well loved by the community. The community loves that parcel down there. People run it, people hike it, people fish it. And so, you know, I was hoping that, you know, potentially Crown Mountain could manage that. They could do, you know, the Roaring Fork Conservancy doesn't have the staff to manage a piece of property. I think the Conservancy could be a really good partner in what to do with the piece of property. But, you know, there's going to be a lot of use. You know, I used it a ton when, you know, my son had soccer games out there, and it's a beautiful place down there, and it's well loved and well used. So it's got to be managed because the Forest Service is not managing it right now. They just cannot. They just don't have the capacity. It's far away from their other pieces of land. So, you know, this is going to be a tricky one that I think we need to, you know, be involved with, but also be careful about because, you know, we don't want to get into another community big controversy because, you know, we get a piece of land. I bike by it a lot. It is not transit oriented by any means. I know people would not want to bike or hike to the bus stop, especially in the winter. So I think we just need to be careful on it. So my take was more of, you know, let's move slowly with the community and really come up with potential compromise that would work not only for the neighbors, but for the greater community. So that was my take.
I guess just to be clear,
Okay.
because I totally agree with Gary. As I understand, there hasn't been any discussion of housing for the parcel because, and I've gotten mixed opinions on this, one participant, a citizen, had heard that there were very significant constraints on construction because of the prevailing zoning. And then when I spoke with Jeff, he said, no, you know, I think you could probably build housing. But suffice it to say, there have been a couple, at least, public-private partnerships that would actually use the land for community-serving purposes that are basically centered on agriculture. So it would be keeping the space open for very constructive purposes, but more or less as open space, if you count agriculture as open space, which I happen to. The other possibility is, as we all know, Sheldon Wolitsky, the entrepreneur who has found residence up in Missouri Heights, has talked about building a rec facility. Now, I didn't discuss that at all with Jeff or with Jason, but it would sure seem to me that that offers an opportunity as well to partner with a private sector interest and develop something that would serve what has been an historic expression of need and want for the Mid-Valley. So I think anything is on the table, and to the extent that we can, I think we should participate actively in these discussions.
Yeah, I guess I would add to that, my comment to Jason was that from my view, and certainly my fellow counselors could disagree, but my impression that I gave him was that, that we have highly formalized and competent land use sort of administrative arrangements in place. We have a Roaring Fork Planning Commission, we have Eagle County Planning, we have a County Planning Commission, commissioners. There's an extraordinarily capable kind of administrative framework in place to evaluate ideas. And as Gary said, it's quite a reach for us from a jurisdictional standpoint. It's outside our town limits. I'm not sure it's even achievable from any sort of kind of development scenario. So I just said, I think our best role is going to be in an advisory kind of referral, kind of classic 3 mile kind of referral agency kind of role. And that was pretty much the extent of my comments about it. But yeah, for sure. I mean, paying attention and seeing what options surface. Yeah, we got to do all that. So. Okay, with that, any further comments on the Eagle County thing? I think May 11th is the completion date for publication of the kind of results of this listening session. And I think probably a lot will come out of that in terms of ideas that are surfacing for the land and taking advantage of the Farm Bill and what it offers. So,
Mayor,
yeah.
I was just going to say, we'll, if staff gets the communication, you all may very well get it, but we can follow up with you to facilitate you being able to hear those results as a council.
Good deal. Thank you. Okay, how are we doing? It's a little after 7, and we're on to our 7 o'clock item, which are now council actions. So our first piece is item 8A. It's the first reading ordinance number 2, series of 2021. It's an ordinance of the Town Council, Town of Basalt, Colorado, approving a license agreement for the encroachment of a bear-proof trash enclosure in the town's right-of-way for the properties located at 408-428 East Cypress Drive. James?
Yeah, thank you. The applicants were supposed to join us, but I don't see them on the Zoom here. And I put in an email to them to try to prompt them to join. I'm wondering if council would be amenable to switching and doing
Sure,
a first, which is the Bach appointment, since Mike is here.
Fine. Yeah, I think Michael is on board here. So if no one else objects, we could move forward to item 8B and then come back and revisit the bear-proof container.
Okay.
Sounds pretty interesting. So our next order of business is item 8B. This is our Basalt Affordable Community Housing recommendation for appointment of Mike Kodrowski to Bach. And Michael, good to see you. Thanks for your willingness to help us out. Hard to imagine anybody that's got any more experience in this area. So, you know, obviously your resume precedes you. So I don't know who wants to address this. I guess it's James and Sarah. We're going to kind of lead us through this discussion. Sarah, you up?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will go ahead and introduce, as you already know, Michael Kodrowski is on the call. He is interested in becoming a member of the Basalt Affordable Community Housing Commission, otherwise known as BAC. As you know, BAC may have up to 7 members, and we currently do have 4 on the commission. And many of you already know BAC, or already know Mike. He has a wealth of experience with affordable as well as workforce housing. He is the former executive director of the Aspen-Picking County Housing Authority, and he is currently the principal and owner of Workforce Housing Solutions. And Bach, I keep saying Bach when I mean to say Mike, I apologize. Mike has been a resident of Basalt since 2015. He has attended a number of Bach's meetings, and he does have the support of Bach members for becoming a member. So this is an opportunity for the council to meet and speak with Mike, ask any questions that you may have about his qualifications and what he may bring to the commission. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Mike for anything you'd like to add.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mike, maybe you could just begin by telling us why you want to do this. This is, as I say, we're very pleased to see you, and you know, this looks great. It'd be good to hear some conversation about your take on housing and Basalt, perhaps the Valley, and what you would offer to Bach and the community should you be appointed.
Very good, Mayor. Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So again, Mike Kozdrowski, resident of Basalt since early 2015, when I moved from the Denver metro area from Denver itself to the Roaring Fork Valley. But as a citizen and as somebody who's been involved with affordable and workforce housing directly, as well as public policy, it's just a passion of mine, you know, to see that we fulfill the mission of all the communities and the regional cooperation that's been moving forward over the last several years, and just to try to meet the needs of this wonderful valley that we live in, and to do it in a way that protects our natural resources, our environment, but also doing it in a way that meets the needs of a variety of income levels. As a resident of Basalt, I see all the great things going on over the last few years, and even since 2015, and some good, some bad, but a lot of mostly good, and seeing the opportunities that exist here in Basalt, but also within the region, particularly some of the conversation I listened in on with respect to the USFS parcel in Eagle County and El Jabal, and just understanding kind of the nuances, and having been part of those conversations early on with Eagle County as the past executive director of the Aspen-Pitkin County Housing Authority. And so, you know, I've tried to, in my previous role up in Aspen, to really include and participate down valley communities, to make sure that because as I saw it from my perspective, and many of my board members' perspective up in Aspen, was that for us to really make inroads and a dent in affordable workforce housing within this region, we were going to need the cooperation of all the jurisdictions, and that you know, Aspen is not an island, and nor is Pitkin County, and that you know, working in tandem with communities like Basalt, as well as communities down valley, would be necessary for the long-term sustainability of not just housing, but of the local and regional economies. And you know, maybe one little nugget to throw in, or two little nuggets. I mean, for those of you who aren't aware, you know, I was very active and participated in promoting and supporting and getting the political support for the Roaring Fork Apartments project, working in tandem with the CEO of Real America, and we became a limited partner in that deal with APSHA. But that helped take the project over the finish line with Colorado Housing Finance Authority, and I'm proud to have worked with the CEO of Real America to make that happen, and as well as James and others with the town of Basalt at that time. And so, and then also I played a very active and instrumental role in the regional housing study that took place several years ago, and probably have been one of the more active proponents and speakers on the subject to a variety of different groups throughout the valley, including a number of Rotary clubs, et cetera. So just to educate the community basically on what that regional housing study concluded, and some of the deficits that we're facing, and try to have a conversation about how to creatively address that going forward. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
Great. Thank you. Good intro. Questions or counsel for Michael? Elise, go ahead.
I agree with Bill Kane that he probably couldn't possibly be more qualified to be on BOC. But I am trying to wrap my head around what your current business, workforce housing solution does, and whether there is a little bit of a conflict of interest. And, you know, full disclosure, I work for a company that does business with the town of Basalt, so it's something that I'm particularly sensitive to. So I wonder if you could address that.
Sure. Well, I don't think there's any conflict of interest, only because I don't have any business with any clients with doing business with the town of Basalt. And that question came up from one of the BOC committee members a month or so ago, and I think I addressed that then. But it's a good question, and my business is I'm working with private and public clients throughout the country on developing plans, programs, and policies, as well as development opportunities for their communities and to solve the workforce housing and affordable housing crisis. And you know, there's a lot of communities that are interested in those services, as well. There is a lot of developers that private partners that I work with. So I kind of work with both, but I don't have any business before the town of Basalt right now, or even in the foreseeable future. But if that were to occur, then I would, of course, acknowledge that, and then, if necessary, recuse myself on any matters that would directly be a conflict.
Great. Michael, I had sort of a philosophical question, or maybe it's not, maybe it's more analytical, but you know, I've lived through at least 4 housing booms in the Valley, probably more than that. And I guess for the first time, it just now really kind of frightens me that what we see unfolding before our eyes right now, where you see houses that everybody's got their own stories, houses that have doubled in value in the last 12 months. And, you know, the question that I would pose is, should we be concerned about the plight that this poses for the concept of affordable free market housing? Or is in fact the concept, is that a contradiction in terms? Is there no such thing as affordable free market housing? Is it by definition that horse got out of the barn a long time ago? And if this is really as alarming as I see it, does this raise new challenges for our communities up and down the Valley to have housing that is, from a financial standpoint, achievable and relevant to our local, not just workforce, but just residents? You know, it's kind of alarming to me, and I don't know if you have a perspective on it.
I do have a perspective on it. We probably don't have enough time to go into all of it, but to answer your to answer several of the questions, or even some of the points you make, I think they're all valid, and my answer would be yes to all of them. Yes, it is a concern, and yes, it's a bit of an oxymoron to find any free market affordable housing for people who are in a certain income spectrum. But that said, I think that, you know, the challenges have been there always, but they're getting more acute, as you pointed out, Mayor. And it's important that we be creative, not just individually as a community or as even housing authorities, but you know, that's where the people like Dave Myler and the late great Bill Lamont pushing the regional housing model. I mean, I don't know if jurisdictionally and collectively, regionally, they're ready for that yet, as I advised them several years ago at the time. But I think if we move forward in a consistent, steady way, like with the regional housing study, you can't come to solutions if you don't identify the problem first. And so it's having a diagnosis and understanding what tools work, what tools don't necessarily work, what models work, what models don't work. And ultimately, as I heard some say early or in discussion, I think with the U.S. Forest Service land, and I thought well stated, was that ultimately you need public-private partnerships and having a lot of different stakeholders at the table, but meaningful stakeholders. You know, you just can't have everybody at the table because that sometimes inhibits, in my opinion, and from my experience, progress. You want to hear and listen to the community, but at the same time, decisions have to be made and the community has to move forward in a way that's progressive and bold, but sensitive to the master plan and the different growth boundaries, and also to the valley itself. So there are opportunities, there's way to do it, but I think ultimately finding partnerships and using the free market approach to help solve some of these puzzles, because I don't think government alone by itself can do the job. And often there are unintended consequences, as we see even up with the APSHA. I mean, there are things that, I mean, APSHA was a great idea, it's a good program in a lot of ways, but I witnessed firsthand for nearly 6 years, a lot of the liabilities associated with having a deed restricted program, and I'm not against deed restrictions, but a deed restriction program that is not well balanced, and it doesn't put enough emphasis on operations and on enough and on accountability. Let me put it that way.
Great. Thank you. Questions? I saw Glenn and then Bill.
So on the APSHA thing, Mike, I'm just going to be straight up with you. That's one of the concerns I had. Like, I saw the letter to the editor. Are you going to be able to work with that entity without any animosity?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to, hear what you think was controversial in the letter to the editor. I'm thinking in regards to, I think you're talking about the letter to the editor I wrote in regards to the capital reserves and the inability of the program to hold sellers accountable in maintaining their product, and it's which is effectively a public good, but in transferring that effective public good to a buyer that can't ultimately afford the cost of bringing it up to current specs or a quality based on the price.
Which I do agree is a valid point. Like, there is that whole deal. I mean, there's plenty of properties that APSHA has that are not up to par. I'm just concerned of, like, do you have the ability to work with the current board? Because Basalt, it's all part of it. Do you have the ability to work with it without having any undue feelings?
I don't have any undue feelings towards APSHA or anybody with the city or the county by any means. But as a citizen and as former executive director, I think I have a responsibility and a duty to speak up when necessary. And I don't name anybody in the letter. I don't attack anybody, and I intentionally wrote it in a way that addressed the issues at hand. And one thing I have a lot of experience on is public policy at every level, local, state, and federal. I know a thing or two about this topic, and that's the APSHA and the city of Aspen and Pickens County are still near and dear to my heart, and it's a passion. And what happens there matters, not just to me, but to those communities, but also to, as you mentioned, Councilman, to the broader region and to the Down Valley community. So goes Aspen and Pickens County with respect to how they handle their inventory. it directly affects what happens subsequently down the valley, and it puts increasing pressures on communities like Basalt, Algebel, Carbondale, Glenwood Springs, and beyond. And so that's where I think it's a fair question, and I respect the fact that you answered it, but yes, I think it's fair to say that I'm happy to work with all parties, and particularly up Valley, with when it comes to regional issues.
Yeah,
I appreciate
yeah,
that.
I think it sounds like the old, I think it was an FDR quote, Aspen sneezes, Basalt gets a cold. So relevant to housing. So that's, Bill, you had your hand up. Bill Infante, you're muted.
Yes, I am, and searching for the button. But Mike, thank you very, very much for applying for the position. Honestly, I like what you've said, and your experience, particularly in public policy, is reassuring. And I think your commitment, as you discussed, to regional solutions, the prior work with Dave Myler and Bill Lamont, again, really, really good stuff, because Basalt will not solve affordable housing unto itself. It will require cooperation up and down the valley with the counties and towns. So you're already so much further down that pike, and that's great. The question I have, however, is related to the role that you see for the public versus the private sector in the ownership, management, operation of affordable housing. How do you see these two sectors working together and kind of cooperating? What's their role?
Yeah, it's a great question, Councilman. I think there certainly the role of government, and having worked on both sides, both private and public for a lot of years, the role of government is to ultimately enable that opportunity to create opportunities, creating the planning based on a public consensus for what the community needs, and do it in a way that is justifiable, legal, and that where you have metrics to support what you're doing, and that's really important from a standpoint of the private sector, because the private sector certainly wants to help solve the problem. Of course, they want to make money doing it, but I mean that the profit motive by itself, I don't think is a nefarious motive. It's a reasonable motive in our market system, and that we ought to respect. And the wonderful thing is to be able to join forces and and I've worked on a number of public-private partnerships over the course of my career very successfully, and both at the local, regional, and statewide level. And it's wonderful to see when it works well. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, up to the last several years, it hasn't really worked well in this region, other than say through, RAFTA is a great example of great cooperation on a regional scale. But the private and public sector, in my opinion, and philosophically, back to the mayor's question, has to be the part of the solution. It can't be one or the other. And of course, if it's one or the other, like in the case of the private sector, it's driving prices higher and higher. Obviously, demand is outstripping supply significantly, and due to COVID and other fiscal and monetary factors, locally and also nationwide, we're seeing a real urgency from people with cash to invest in property, particularly property here in the Roaring Fork Valley. And so it's important that, we really, where you bid out projects, but you have the opportunity to just, where government has to be very clear in its expectations and not have any, you try to minimize, if not negate entirely, uncertainty in once a project begins, because oftentimes I've seen that firsthand, and I'm sure you know of plenty of examples. If there's uncertainty after somebody's already signed on to a project, it can derail it, and that it gets almost like one step forward, two steps back, right? And that's, you know, just like with the Roaring Fork or the Real America project, that was a great example. And also the Habitat project with the Roaring Fork School District and Basalt High School in Pickens County. But, you know, the Roaring Fork project, Real America, APSHA, Basalt, the town of Basalt, you know, we partnered and we brought forward 56 affordable workforce housing units. And that, I think, was a real accomplishment on a piece of property that was just lying vacant. I mean, with a foundation that was sticking out of the ground since the market crash of 2007 or 2008. And it was wonderful to be able to be a part of that, to a public-private partnership to get that thing, get that project underway and built. And we were able to do it, and a credit to everybody, within 2 years. One thing I'll add, I do philosophically don't believe, because I've seen it, and also practically, I don't believe government's very good at building inventory. I've seen it firsthand. You can do it to a point, but it's better to have the free market build it, and then the government to set expectations and the boundaries for developing within it. Okay. But ultimately, the reason I say that is that ultimately, every time government builds housing, whether affordable, you want to call it affordable or workforce housing, it is effectively, any warranty issue becomes a taxpayer issue. It becomes a political issue. We've seen it time and again up in Aspen where, you know, a year later or 10, 20, 30 years later, the owners in particular, when they're owner-occupied units, will come back and ask the taxpayers to pay for any improvements, like in the case of capital reserves or insufficient HOAs, and we've seen that. And so from that point alone, I think it's probably best to allow the private sector, government help build it, but with arm's length in setting the parameters for it. I hope that answers your question.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Additional questions for Mike? I would ask then for a motion on our proposed Bach appointment. I think we have at least one counselor muted. Bill, I see.
Having meeting issues today. Sorry about that, Mike. It's no indication of, you know, kind of wavering interest or commitment. Mayor, I move that the town council appoint Mike Kozdrowski to Bach for a term ending April 30, 2023.
Second.
Okay. Thanks. Been moved and seconded. Jeff, can we do this voice vote or we need a roll call?
Probably. Voice vote is fine.
Yeah. Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any nays? Okay. Welcome aboard, Michael. We're going to look forward to having more conversations with you. You know, on behalf of the town, we really sincerely appreciate your interest and look forward to your help in trying to make a dent in what is undoubtedly a huge challenge here. But you know, we got great stuff going. So I think we're up to 273 units now. So we'll look forward to your help and getting some more. So thank you. James, are we ready to go back, or do you want to still sue for more time here?
Well, we believe we might have the applicant on the line. Okay. Is the number 379-8787, is that you, Liz Lane?
They're muted.
If you could please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yeah, hi, is that Liz?
Yes, it is.
Okay, great. I believe we can go ahead with this item.
Okay, we're going back to item 8A, just for the public's information. This is a first reading on a town ordinance. It's ordinance number 2, series of 2021. It's an ordinance of the town council of the town of Basalt, Colorado, approving a license agreement for the encroachment of a bear-proof trash enclosure in the town's right-of-way for the properties located at 408-428 East Cypress Drive. So, James, why don't you lay this out for us?
I'm going to share my screen here. This is consideration of an ordinance on first reading that would approve of a license agreement for the property owners at 408 through 428 Cypress Drive to finish construction on and maintain a trash recycling enclosure that they partially constructed in the Cypress Drive right-of-way. And it was constructed at the corner of Cypress Drive and the private driveway that serves 408 through 428 East Cypress. As you can see on the map here, this is East Cypress Drive. This is the private driveway going up to the north. And then here is Cedar Drive as you make the big curve there off of Cypress Drive. And here is the proposed the trash enclosure and the proposed license agreement area. The staff asked the owners to stop construction until a license agreement is reviewed and approved. We have a photo in your packet of the partial construction that's occurred, and it's also here on the screen. In reviewing the request for the license agreement, staff reviewed it with Public Works as well as police and the fire district. Public Works didn't believe it would be an impediment to their plowing operations. And they also did not think it would be in the sight line from the intersection. Fire and police also didn't think it would impede their operations. However, the police department reiterated that the materials would have to be wildlife resistant, as well as to meet the wildfire mitigation requirements that were included in our recent ordinance. So we do have a draft ordinance and agreement that's in your packet. It requires that the applicant obtain a building permit to finish off the structure. It also requires review of the materials to make sure that they're wildlife resistant as well as wildfire resistant and meet the mitigation ordinance. There's also provisions requiring that the applicant maintain it, and it expresses that the town would not be liable for damage to the structure since it's in the right-of-way. It also would allow for the town to remove the structure in the future if we needed to. So this evening, staff would recommend taking comments from the applicant. We do have Liz Lane representing the homeowner group as well, and then provide council discussion. If you're comfortable with the proposed ordinance and agreement, you could approve it on first reading and set a second reading date for April 27th. We do have Liz on the phone here. Let me stop sharing my screen. Liz, do you have any comments for the council?
My only comment is that what we're doing, in my opinion, benefits the appearance of Cypress Drive, and it certainly benefits the homeowners that live up a very steep driveway and need to roll down and back trash, you know, only on Monday mornings and not leave trash cans on the street. And just in my observation of Cypress Drive, there are several encroachment areas that have, you know, some structure on it. And also, just in my opinion, driving around on Mondays, you know, when it's trash day, the trash can just get really out of hand. And so to add this structure is just enhancing for the town, it's enhancing for the street, and it actually opened up a better view from coming down the driveway. And also Cedar Drive comes into play on Cypress Drive. And I think it's enhanced the visibility of people turning from Cedar Drive onto Cypress Drive, and also people coming up and down this driveway being able to see around the corner to see more visibility of cars coming or what's going on the street. And it gives a little bit of a buffer because we've flattened it out and gravelled it. So it's actually a little bit of an enhancement for pulling off the road if you needed to.
Okay. Questions of council for James or the applicant? So this is not a public hearing. We may take action tonight. I would entertain a motion to take action on first reading of ordinance number 2, series of 2021.
All right, looks like Glenn has a question.
Yeah.
So my question for the applicant would be, why wasn't approval sought beforehand?
You know, what we did was a lot of on our own property. My property abuts that, and so we had the access to a backhoe and a crew that was available at that time, and it really was something that you know, we didn't really build a structure on the ground. What we did is we excavated off of my property, and we put in some 2x4s and built where we want the building to go, but we didn't really construct on the right of way, in our opinion. You know, we did excavate back on my own property, and we tried to set it back as far as we could, but it's just obviously that it's going to have to come out a little ways. But again, what we did, in our opinion, enhanced it.
So this is one thing I want to clarify. Opinions are one thing, but like actually going forth, getting a building permit, doing the right things are another thing. I'm not trying to chastise anybody, but on the same token, like if people are allowed to go out, build what they want to do, come back to us and ask for forgiveness, at what point does the town building code mean anything? You understand the position you're putting the town council in by the actions that you've assumed?
Well, again, there's not a structure there. What's happened is there's been some excavation take place and some reworking of the land.
But not within your property, within a town right away.
What we're going to build will be in the town's property. It'll have a covered roof, and it'll encroach on the right of way of Soper's Drive that was a hillside slope and not usable. And I don't know, I didn't think I was really harming or doing anything out of an alignment with complying with the town.
Gary?
So I don't have a question. I just, you know, to me, I just, you know, there are some existing structures and right-of-ways, but those have been there forever. I just don't feel ever inclined to approve new ones. It sets a bad precedent. I know we could always say no to the next one, but this sets a bad precedent, so I'm not going to support this.
Well, the adjoining property to this driveway has a huge rock wall, retaining wall on the property, and their trash cans are out in the open, not enclosed. And, you know, to me, you know, I think what's happened is definitely an improvement to the town of Basalt. And I welcome you to come by and look at it. And if you don't want us to construct it, that's fine. You know, it's just to help the citizens of Basalt. It's not just my personal thing. There's several properties here that need trash removal, and the trash companies cannot go up this little driveway to get their trash cans closer to their home. So, you know, what we were doing is trying to solve some problems, and we're in front of you asking for permission at this point.
And the only thing I would add is you started the process without asking permission.
We excavated on, well, mostly on my property. Yep.
But it ended up on the town right away and no permission was ever asked.
That's correct. I'm not going to dispute that. We had all the utility companies come out. I called up the town of Basalt's, I forget what the title is, and talked to somebody who directed me to contact the town of Basalt. So I contacted James. And so at that point, James informed me that, we should not, that we needed to submit a drawing, which we did. And we just, like I said, this crew was ready to go. And you know how busy construction people are these days. It was just like opportunity was there for us to enhance our neighborhood.
Well, as someone that does live in the neighborhood, I would like to chime in. I totally agree with what you're saying, Glenn. But at the same point, I think Liz has made some good points in the fact that that turn at Cedar Drive and where their joint driveway comes out, this has actually cleared somewhat of a blind spot in a pretty high traffic area that I walk all the time. I think we have granted some other right of ways recently that I think if you would come look at, this one is actually probably not even as close to some of the other ones. So if no one has anything else to say, I'm just going to say, Mayor, I move the Town Council approve ordinance number 2, series of 2021 on first reading and set public hearing and second reading for April 27th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with David Knight.
No.
I'm sorry, you said no, sir?
That's correct.
Thank you. Gary Tenenbaum?
No.
Thank you. Glenn Drummond?
No.
Thank you. Elise Hoddle? Elise Hoddle?
Sorry, no.
Thank you, Elise. Bill Kane?
Yes.
Bill Infante?
Yes.
Thank you. And Ryan Slack?
Yes.
Motion fails 4-3.
Okay, thank you very much. So I presume James will follow up and see what remedies can be made to make sure this does not occur on the town right away. So
I will do so.
What was the final count? Was it 4-3?
Correct. 3 in favor, 4 opposed.
That concludes item 8A. We are on now to council action under item 8C, Capital Needs Committee update and resolution number 16, series of 2021. A resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving bylaws for the Capital Needs Committee. Christy is going to lead us through this one.
Yeah, you bet. So this, as Ryan stated earlier in the presentation or the council meeting today, is that this is the resolution that's going to approve the Capital Needs Committee that was discussed earlier in the town manager report as part of the Basalt Forward 2030 project. We have been working with department heads and with Jeff Conklin to make sure that this committee is set up as a temporary committee and is comprised, as we've discussed, of the 8 committees that are representative of all of the committees and boards that work, that are citizen-led with the town, as well as the Basalt Chamber. So that would be who would be comprised of the board, so of this committee. Excuse me. So do you guys have any questions or?
Christy, I just had a question. In the original construct, I understood that the Capital Needs Committee was going to have some say or some ability to advise on the ultimate issuance of debt. And my reading of the role and responsibility seems to be more restricted to the evaluation of the Cushing-Terrell assessment of facilities needs. And so I wonder how those two are going to intersect.
Thanks, Bill. That's a really great question. So pretty much what would happen with this is a recommending body to the council. So they can't recommend, taking out debt or anything like that, but we're going to discuss some various funding options with them. Just so that they understand that there are these possibilities out there for funding. One could be a voter initiative, and that's the majority of what this would look like. So, but really, I think the impetus on this committee is going to be looking at what the Basalt Master Plan has in it from what the council and the citizens already said, and then adding the facility needs study that they're doing now, and then kind of combining that and looking at the recommendations and having some conversation back and forth with council that will result in a final recommendation from the committee. And then council would have the ultimate authority of looking at what would actually be funded through, if it's a voter approved initiative or the general fund or restricted funds or whatever, and how that would look like. But they'll have conversations about funding as well. Does that help?
And I'll just add one more point of clarification that this resolution would both create the committee and then approve the bylaws for it. Those bylaws contain the qualifications for the members and the process for appointment. They also contain kind of the bounds of when the committee will exist and its purposes, the purposes of the committee. Those are also set forth in the bylaws. And Christy kind of went through them there, and as part of her introduction, reviewing that facility needs study, the Basalt Master Plan, and other information from the public to make recommendations to council on those capital priorities, and then kind of the scope of potential cost and potential funding options there. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
Okay, further questions for Christy on the Capital Needs Committee? So this being yeah.
Mayor Elise has a question, I believe.
Yeah, Elise, go ahead, please.
Thank you. This isn't necessarily related to the bylaws, so this may not be the best place to ask this question, but in the process of this conversation, it came to mind is, what is the procedure for introducing, sorry, that's my dog, procedure for introducing something that's outside of the facility assessment or the master plan? I'm just curious, if somebody has some great idea. There's something that Ryan said earlier that I was like, oh, we should consider that I don't think was part of the Basalt master planning process. What is the procedure for that? And if this is not the place to talk about it, we can table it, but I'm just curious. I want to get that on the record somewhere.
I might chime in on that just briefly. I think council ultimately, if there are ideas that emerge that you're interested in, I think you can certainly bring those up. We're planning on hearing from the community, so there may be some different ideas that emerge. Now, the one challenge that we have, if it's something we had never contemplated or heard of, is trying to nail down a cost with that, because ultimately we are intending to proceed ahead on some very high level conceptual costs as part of this that we could then plug into ultimately an ask or some other funding mechanism. So we would probably really want to understand what those are early and often, so that there would be that time council could ask Cushing Terrell to try to come up with some kind of cost or conceptual design on something. But there's that element. So I think just because it's not in the master plan or just because it's not in the facility needs doesn't mean it's out of bounds. I just think one consideration is obviously the master plan has the weight of the community behind it through that process. And then the facility needs committee in their discussions would weigh in on what they heard. And so I think hopefully that answers your question, that it's not that anything's out of bounds or off limits, but I do think at some point we want to kind of narrow our focus and make sure we're honing in on the projects that the committee identifies or the community identifies.
Yeah, and I think that the whole purpose behind this committee is that it's really kind of an arm of council. So the intent is to bring back these conversations regularly to the council so that you guys are aware of all of that. And so there's no big surprises.
Additional questions? All right. With that, unfortunately, I lost my agenda here. So I would ask for a motion to approve IMPC resolution number 16, series of 2021.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 16, series of 2021 as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Jeff, Rezzo, do we want voice vote or roll call? Roll call. Okay.
Roll call, please.
All right. Let's begin with Bill Infante.
Yes.
Thank you. Ryan Slack.
Yes.
Thank you, Ryan. Bill Kane.
Yes.
Thank you. Elise Hoddle.
Yes.
Thank you. Gary Tenenbaum.
Yes.
Thank you. Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Thank you. And David Knight.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, that takes us to item 8D. This is resolution number 17, series of 2021, resolution approving an agreement between the town of Basalt and Basalt River Park LLC regarding responsibilities for public improvements for Two Rivers Road. James?
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to share my screen here, just a quick second. So this item is consideration of a resolution that would approve of an agreement with Basalt River Park LLC for Basalt River Park LLC or their assigns to do the construction and manage the construction of the Two Rivers Road improvements associated with the Basalt River Park and Basalt River Park development construction. As background, Basalt River Park development was approved pursuant to ordinance number 6 of 2020 that you have in your packet. It identified that the applicant for the development would put $600,000 toward the general Two Rivers Road improvements that were associated with the River Park and the River Park development. It didn't specify who would construct those improvements. And the improvements that we're talking about include the addition of several chicanes that are similar to those by the River Center and Rocky Mountain Institute to improve pedestrian access across Two Rivers Road. Staff and Basalt River Park development representatives believe that having Basalt River Park's contractor manage the Two Rivers Road work is beneficial in that it would minimize conflicts between contractors, like we've had out of Willits from time to time, as the one contractor would be constructing the Basalt River Park development as well as the Two Rivers Road improvements. It would also be appropriate due to the town's limited staff resources to have Basalt River Park manage the construction of the improvements. So staff previously introduced this idea to council, and council seemed supportive of the concept. So staff has brought back a draft resolution and agreement for consideration by the council, provides a framework, and identifies that Basalt River Park will put their $600,000 obligation, as well as the town will put money in the escrow account up to the construction cost estimate that town staff sent out today to the council that was done by Cypress Engineering. And so those monies in the escrow account would be withdrawn by BRP or their assigns to construct the improvements with written authorization by both parties when a withdrawal happens. The agreement also includes that BRP's contractor will come up with a contract to do the work, and that contract would be reviewed by the town manager if the amount of the contract is below that of the cost estimate, which is for $1,184,982. And then the provisions say that if the contract that's proposed comes in at more than that cost estimate amount, then staff would bring it back to the council for consideration. That said, the finance director, Christy Chacoin, has prepared a comparison of the updated cost estimate with the funds that we have budgeted for the project in 2021. It would be about $169,000 above what we had in the budget for 2021. And Christy will briefly go through how we would fund the $169,000 overage. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow for Christy to bring that up.
Thanks, James. Okay. So yes, so just to, first of all, sorry, I'm trying to get this to, okay, there we go. Just to introduce what we started with our initial budget for 2021. There were various funding sources, but the total for this project in the initial budget is $1,670,200, funded through the general fund at $50,000, RFC Rita at $296 and change. The developer contribution, as James mentioned, at $600,000, and then post, it's part of the Two Rivers sidewalk. So that's the sources and uses in the initial budget. So what I did is denoted the project overages in pink, just because this is a pretty quick overview. So everybody could see them pretty readily, apparently. So looking at the cost estimation in the bid that was sent to you guys, or the estimate that was sent today, $1,184,982. We've got some other minimal costs that estimated at $5,000 for a total project cost of $1,189,982. In talking to James and Susan and Ryan today, we thought it might be a good idea to include a town-specific contingency that would not be used for contractor overages, so that if there were things that came up in the project that the town wanted to look at doing and that's in the best interest of the town, that we would still not have to come to council again looking for more money, so to speak. So we put a 5% contingency in there. The cost estimate itself has a 10% contingency, which is more on the contract, construction contract side. So the total project would be at $1,249,000. And there was some additional development specific that were added into the scope of this that are not town paid that you have to back out to get to the $1,175,000. with an original budget of 1,000,006. So that's how you get to your 169 difference. And so we had some conversation initially about how we could fund that. So I always do a sources and uses when we're looking at really large construction, just to make sure we're all on the same page. And included our original budget amounts in there, plus the developer 600,000 plus the additional 773 that was added in this scope, and then the post original budget. Then the ones in pink are our additions that will require a supplemental budget. We believe that it'll be 16,000 currently at post for the new sidewalks portion of that, in addition to the 60 that we already had coming out of post. Then RETA 2, restricted funding, would be funding that overage at 100,000, and then general fund of 53,073. So that's how we get to that project total of 1,249,041. Okay. So this is just all just to make sure that we're all on the same page on what's included on our cost estimations. Okay. Any questions?
Christy, when do you think we would get a lock on what the ultimate top set will be for our share of this? Is this sort of a guaranteed maximum, or is this going to continue to, I mean, is there going to be cost creep on this? Will it continue to float up, or is this it, this one and done?
Well, you know, so this is what I know about this, is the cost estimation that we're getting is the best estimation we've had. Our initial estimates are a couple years old, and with everything that's happened with construction, this was a little bit to be expected, just given the insanity of the market right now. But having said that, we haven't yet bid it out either. So, I mean, if I was going to really be able to tell council that this is the end all, then I would probably play the stock market. But we're hopeful that, you know, we've really built in some things such as the 5% and the 10% contingency to really have some reasonable assurances that this is going to be able to cover our costs.
Okay.
And Mayor, just to clarify, the agreement, the way it's set forth, has Basalt River Park LLC working with their contractor to get a price and a draft contract for review by town staff. And then if it's over this estimate number, then we would have to bring it back to council for a council review. So it's not a scenario where we're bidding it out. It's Basalt River Park LLC working with their contractor to come up with a price and a draft contract. And so we're using the cost estimate done by Sopris as kind of a check or balance on that scenario.
Okay, thank you. Questions of council for Christy or James? Tim Belinsky's on hand also if necessary. Gary?
The question I have for, well, it's not necessarily a question. I think it's going to be, we're in a difficult time. And so hopefully Tim can find a way to get a bid that's, you know, that's reasonable and can hit these engineer estimates, because I'm not seeing that this spring for some, you know, it's kind of crazy out there. So question was kind of to Tim, because he's going to be managing this whole thing. So on his thoughts of where the budget's going to be at.
Well, I think there's a process there that we need to get going on, and we have already begun to move it forward. And I think it was good planning on everybody's part to bring this to the forefront. It was late last fall in terms of how we're going to go to market. And in that step, we notified our general contractor to put out the word to the subcontractor trades that this bidding will come and that they ought to be reserving time slots for this road work. So hopefully by having kind of pre-noticed these subs. This is not just now coming as new information to them and they're ready to go. Certainly been our expectation as we manage our way into this. But we do need to see it through here, and we'll need about a month to confirm these numbers, Gary.
Additional questions for James, Tim?
Glenn's got one.
Yeah, Glenn, go ahead, please.
The only thing I like, just so like the public understands, like we're all going to share the pain of cost increases, right?
Well, the developer, per the ordinance of approval, is only required to put in a $600,000 contribution to the Two Rivers Road improvements. So, you know, cost increases are kind of borne by the town as part of that approval. You know, that said, when the applicant is working, or BRP is working on getting a contract, you know, we have the opportunity to review that contract, you know, before we give it a thumbs up. So
I just know like cost of lumber is probably quadruple what it was last year. I mean, a 4x6 sheet of 1/2 inch by 4x8 is $50. It was $13 last year. So, I mean, it would be good for the public to know that, like, at least we're all sharing this pain a little bit. Probably can't do that, but
Glenn, let me kind of,
stated.
if I can speak again of the process. The contract that we're seeking from this is a guaranteed maximum price. So once we have the contract, you know, at the end of this bidding process, the contract will be what it is in terms of the grand total. And then the town's risk and community's risk in terms of undertaking a big project like this is shifted to the contractor taking that risk and managing their subcontractors to those fixed bids.
Additional comments, questions? All right. It's a oft overworked phrase, but it is what it is. So I would entertain a motion on resolution number 17, series of 2021.
Mayor, I move the town council adopt resolution number 17, series of 2021 as presented.
Second.
Second.
Okay, been moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin with Elise Huddle.
Honestly, I'm not really sure I understand this, so I'm going to abstain.
Thank you. Bill Kane?
Yes.
Thank you. Ryan Slack?
Yes.
Thank you. David Knight?
Yes.
Thank you. Bill Infante?
Yes.
Thank you. Glenn Drummond?
Yes.
Thank you. Gary Tenenbaum?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries 6-1 abstention.
Thank you very much. That concludes item 8D on your program. We now move to item 8E. So 8E is a presentation in resolution number 18, series of 2021. This is a resolution of the Town Council of Basalt, Colorado, approving the Basalt River Project phasing plan and directing staff to request bids for construction of phase 1. James.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, this item is consideration of a resolution that would approve of the phasing plan for Basalt River Park and direct.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I will be recusing myself.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll text you when we're off. No, that will be it, right?
yeah, this is a resolution approving a phasing plan for Basalt River Park and directing staff to put phase 1 of the project out to bid. In February, staff presented phasing concept of doing the grading, the utilities, and the hardscape for the park in 2021, and then doing the softscape and amenities for the park in 2022. Consistent with the way that we have the funding laid out in the town's 2021 budget. The town's park design consultants, Connect One Design, as well as Cypress Engineering, have prepared construction level drawings on the phase 1 work. And they're based on the conceptual park design that was previously approved by the council that we have in your packet. This evening, we do have Connect One Design present. We've got Elise Wolf from Connect One Design, and she is going to briefly go over the construction drawings and what's in them, as well as kind of detail the phasing. And then we're going to have consideration of the resolution to put phase 1 out to bid. So with that, would like to introduce Elise. Elise, do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to bring up what?
I can share my screen. Let me go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
Hi, Council. Thank you for having us tonight. Hopefully everybody can see screen now. This is an illustrative plan of the park as a whole. So I'm just going to go over quickly the elements of the park. 99% of this has not changed, but I'll bring up anything that has changed. So we have the bus stop here, the new alignment that we just talked about on Two Rivers Road. Phase 2 will include the bus shelter and a bathroom and maintenance facility, or vault, basically, for the misting feature, like equipment vault. We have this beautiful bosque of trees in crusher fines and planting area. And we did receive a comment from Post. I believe we met with them 2 weeks ago that they asked if, while those trees are growing in, if we could provide some kind of shade. So we have implemented areas for shade sail posts to be installed in phase 2 to give some shade to that plaza area as the trees go in, and then you can remove them. Those posts will also help to accommodate some lighting in that area. The plaza colors here, you see the red, the light gray, and the dark gray are reminiscent of the hillside just above the park on Basalt Mountain. Those reds, those dark grays of the basalt, and the white. So that's supposed to represent the geologic layers. And then we have this strip of the misting feature made of basalt stone, and the misters we talked about very early on are really low water usage. This is like the best balance of being able to provide a water feature, a play feature, with the lowest amount of water usage possible. We then have the Great Lawn and the band shell / climbing wall. That'll be in phase 2. A sod berm with a slide. That'll be in phase 2 as well. And everything, all the paths that you see in gray are then crusher fines paths. So these are lined specifically so that the sanitation district can get their trucks out there to service the 3 manholes on site. And what you're not seeing in this illustrative plan is that we presented an option to them to actually do more of a 2-track road here because it is quite wide. So we're going to be able to do a 4-foot section of crusher fines, a 4-foot section of grass, and then a 4-foot section of crusher fines. And that'll allow the wheels of their truck to get on there without making a really obtrusive path on this east-west connector. Coming up to the restaurant and where the town's property is, where the art base used to, was once designed for. We have a hillside garden. Out here we have these beautiful hay bales that can be brought in yearly, a climbing tree with some benches. And then as we move further west, we're getting more and more into connecting back into the wetlands and Old Pond Park feel. So less formal paths, down to picnic areas that could be pull-offs for river usage. Trails down there are especially important as the sun beats down on this area. We have some slack line posts and the some amendments to the existing sand beach. One thing I did forget, along Midland Avenue, we have some boulder seating here, which will be a great view to the park, and even if people come to have lunch on that edge without entering the park. So I'll go into some of the less beautiful construction documents, but this is showing what we're going to be installing for phase 1. So that's all of the hardscape, like James said. You can see all of that in color here. The concrete banding of the rail lines on the edge of the Great Lawn. All of the crusher fines paths, include from this big eddy circle all the way to the east-west connector. The paths down to the river and the picnic areas. We'll be putting doing all of the boulder work along this boat. I'll just zoom in here. Boat pull off and the Midland Avenue edge. And then there's also been talk about if there's enough money to install the Great Lawn. So how phasing works, we specifically kind of scheduled it so that phase 1 will go in the fall. We'll be able to wrap that up for the winter, be able to open some of the trail connections that already exist, kind of leaving this middle space untouched for the winter. And then spring of 2022 comes along and pick that right back up for phase 2. So it doesn't appear like the park is being divided into phasing. It's just kind of one seamless phase with winter, non-construction period. That's all I had to present, but I'll take questions.
And I did want to note, Elise mentioned it, but we were considering and trying to include a bid alternative in the bid package that would allow potentially the Great Lawn to be put in the phase 1. It all depends on what the price of bids we get, and also whether contractors think that they can get sod in the late fall time period.
What drives the installation of the Great Lawn so late in the season? Is there not a way that can be fast tracked and put on a parallel track with the hardscape and the other phase 1 elements?
It could, potentially, depending on cost, what we see on that, because, for 2021, we have a certain cost that, or certain funds available in the budget that would potentially just be all the hardscape and utilities. But we would like to include that as a bid alternative for phase 1 to see what we get.
Yeah, it would. I guess if it's so late in the season, it's almost a little immaterial from the standpoint of sort of public use and impact. If it's, if it's not occurring until October or so, then you know, but if it's possible that it's an August item, you know, that's going to really make a difference. But what's the irrigation scheme for the Great Lawn? This is obviously got to be spray irrigation. What do we have in mind there?
Well, so with phase one, the concept is installing the laterals, and you know, if we did get the bid alternative and wanted to go ahead and put the Great Lawn in, you'd have to also do the service lines off of the laterals as part of phase one.
Okay, that's in the phase one plan.
That would be in the bid alternative.
Okay,
to put in the Great Lawn. Yeah.
So it's companion with the Great Lawn that goes in as a one unit.
Right.
Okay.
The phase one just includes the main line. So the main line, there is a main line out there irrigating the sod and the native grasses. And we're going to need to cap that at certain areas because it goes into the development. It goes into some of the 20-foot offset from the 20-foot construction offset from the development. But then all of the actual zoning and heads will be done in phase two. So to fast track the lawn would also need to fast track that whole irrigation area.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there are a lot of moving parts here. I mean, I think that, you know, if there was a chance where if it was strictly a dollar consideration to move up the Great Lawn, I think it'd be very exciting for our public to see all that happening in year one. But it looks like it's dependent on too many other construction activities out there to get in place. So I will restrain my enthusiasm about trying to get all that grass in place summer of 2021. Thank you.
Hey,
Other
Bill?
questions? Gary, go ahead.
Yeah, and my question on the bid alternative, what's included in the bid alternative?
Primarily, it's the irrigation for the Great Lawn and putting the Great Lawn in phase one, 2021.
Okay, so I was just checking to see if anything else was included in that bid alternative because, you know, you never know what a contractor can and cannot do. I think it's a lot. I doubt we'll get to it, but it'd be great to see if the alternative comes along, because if they can do it and we can, you know, just fast track some funding for that, I think it's something that we should at least consider.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the misting feature is not part of phase one at all, even a bid alternative?
No, it's not.
Right.
Okay.
Additional questions, David?
They have been said already, but when is the existing turf and vegetation going to be raised or excavated, or whatever the term is? Just to clarify. So we all have like an expectation of when we'll see that.
We don't have an exact construction schedule yet because we're still working on going out to bid, but we're looking at a end of season August, September. It'll have to be demoed sooner in this phase because we'll be doing a lot of the rough grading. And that's specifically why we decided to, let me go back to this version. This dotted line here represents basically a limit of work fence, and we can keep some of that area just because there's no grading allowed for the Lomar extents, floodway extents.
It should be noted that there is also a water line for the development that is supposed to be extended across a portion of the park. So that work will probably happen earlier. So a portion of the park will get potentially torn up, you know, a little bit earlier in the summer.
Have we finalized the Lomar for this property?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Good to know.
Bill, you have a question? Bill Infante.
Yeah, go
Elise,
ahead, Bill. Sorry, with you know, the graphics, it's hard to see. I can't get everybody on the screen, so I can't see very well, but go ahead.
No worries. I have a question for Elise. You said something about some landscaping or some earthworks that are going to be done on the property that was going to be occupied by the art base. And I'm just curious if I heard that correctly, but I'm also interested in what we're doing, Bill Kane, and what our current thinking is about the disposition of the art base property. And then I guess I'm also interested in the timing of our own earthwork with whenever Tim and Andrew are going to break ground on all of the other construction. How does all that timing fit together? So first question, yeah.
Let me clarify the first question. So this is the former art-based parcel.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that highlighter does not, it's not very big. And I was just talking about this area down here. It's kind of a hillside garden, we're saying. It'll be the most vegetated. Otherwise, nothing is occurring within that property boundary.
Okay. At least not as part of this bid scenario. You know, we probably still have some planning to do on what a temporary scenario might be on that property.
Got it. And then just in terms of all the work that we're doing under phase 1 and then phase 2 next summer, how does that all relate to breaking ground of the Basalt River Park LLC buildings?
Is Tim Belinsky still on?
Yeah,
I am. I'll speak to that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. As it relates to the work we're getting underway with, we're really excited with the restaurant progress, which we had during approvals determined that could be the last thing possible on the project. It looks like it'll be the first thing now. So when we look at the Great Lawn going in and the rest of phase 2, I had wanted to pipe up, but I know I've got to be careful here, that that restaurant is going to be the first building going up in the project starting early this summer, and it's projected to be open for business by the end of the calendar year if all goes according to plan. So if that Great Lawn and the things up against the patio edge, at least maybe you could circle that around the restaurant, was kind of as calmed as possible, it certainly helped the success of the opening of the restaurant. Even though in winter, the presumption is it's all going to be under snow, but this winter it wouldn't have been. So whatever we can do to kind of coordinate on that, we'll make sure we're doing it with planning staff and with Connect One as well, and the site work that's getting underway. So big picture, Bill, the restaurant comes first. It'll be open within this time next year, and we're projecting even end of this calendar year. We want to, get the word out publicly. I was told today it's the worst kept secret, but we do need to keep it off public record until they're a little further along with their own entitlement or their own approvals to purchase that site and build the building. As it relates to the left side and the residential program that's currently out there, we'll be commencing the construction of those 3 blocks, which is consisting of 5 residential units, kicking off this May with the groundwork and going vertical, we expect in July. And then the upper left white block is part of that same phase. There's a total of 8 residential units, and that street frontage set of buildings has been modified so that it mirrors what we have as requirements under the ordinance. Don't have only 8 units underway until we can get into the affordable housing, which is the mixed use building to the right. But what we have is 3 units in the upper left white box, and then 3 more that come on the right side of that. And then mixed use building is a whole nother program. We'll save that for another day. But we are enthusiastic about the reception of the residential units to the marketing, and the reception by buyers. And it has Andrew Light and I beginning to plan to move on phase 2 kind of sooner rather than later. There's no strategic reason to delay if the market is ready for these things. So maybe what we should all plan for at the end of May is a groundbreaking event.
Great. That's great news, Tim. Thanks millions.
It's feeling good.
The other thing I'd like to add is we all got to realize this has been what, 3-4 different councils. It's been a long process. We're on the end of this. We're on the end run. Like, let's have a little patience. It's not going to be done this year, but it's going to be a great project once it's completed. It just takes a little time. So a little patience on the entire community is going to be appreciated on everybody's behalf.
Yeah, I guess I would say about the alternative bid and the Great Lawn is that, you know, if it's possible to get it in during the growing season and, you know, we have a chance for this sod to take root and get, you know, a good month of water on it, irrigation, and get it settled. I would hate to see, you know, sod going down in November. That usually doesn't work well. I mean, I've seen it a lot, and the result is disappointing. So, I mean, I wouldn't pursue the Great Lawn sodding unless you can do that during the late summer, early fall, still within a growing season where we can get these grasses stabilized. It's probably just not worth it. But it'd be very, very cool to have that Great Lawn in place when the restaurant opens its doors. That would be a pretty stunning start of business out there. So just throw that out. But I kind of agree with Glenn. It's not worth, you know, having waited all this time, then make some hasty decisions to try to create some big impact in summer 1. So. All right. Additional questions for James or Elise or Tim? Okay. If there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve resolution number 18 series of.
Mayor, I move that town council adopt resolution number 18 series of 2021 as presented.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Pam, please call the roll.
Absolutely. Let's begin. Bill Infante.
Yes.
Thank you. David Knight.
Yes.
Thank you. Gary Tenenbaum.
Yes.
Thank you. Bill Kane.
Yes.
Thank you. Ryan Slack.
Yes.
Thank you. Elise Hoddle.
She's recused.
Oh, I'm sorry. She's recused herself. Thank you. Glenn Drummond.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right, thank you, guys. That concludes our regular meeting business. We will ask council to stand by. We have an executive session conversation to be had. So thank everybody that's in attendance. Andrew and Tim, thanks for coming. Chief, thank you. So Pam, do we need a new?
Jeff, do we have to do this now?
So
Pam, why don't you explain what we're doing?
I'll leave it to Jeff. Thank you.
Sure. So we've reached the end of our agenda, and our last item is an executive session. We'll need a motion to go into that executive session as set out in the packet. I believe Pam circulated a separate Zoom link for us to then use to participate in the executive session. Unless there is some action that needs to be taken on the record by town council following the executive session, we won't be returning to the meeting, and that will conclude the meeting. It's not expected that any action will be needed by town council. And just so for the public's information, this would be the end of the meeting, and we'll have the separate recording of the executive session, which would then conclude things.
Very good. So with that,
Mayor.
Yeah.
I'll do it. Mayor, I move that the town council enter executive session to discuss the purchase, acquisition, lease, transfer, or sale of property interests in accordance with CRS 24-6402-4A, more specifically to discuss the purchase of affordable housing properties.
Second.
Excuse me. Is there a second?
Second.
Let Drummond do this.
All right. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? We're going to roll call on this guy now. I think we can.
We can do a voice vote.
Okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. That concludes our regular meeting. We go into executive session. Pam, do we have to sign off and get on a new link?
You do sign off here. I did send you a meeting link.
Okay.
Probably at about 4:45 this evening. So
Okay.
if for some reason you don't see it, text me.
Okay. See you in a minute.
Thanks, everybody.